across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's just after 6 o'clock on Sunday, February the 2nd. I'm David Bull, and this is Weekend Breakfast. A very good morning to you. Thanks ever so much for your company. Now, just to amuse you this morning, I have some great news for you. Of course I do. It's Sunday. It is actually Hedgehog Day today, a day that raises awareness of these spiky little creatures and their habitat. Here's a fact for you. They like to sleep most of the time. Lucky them. And here's also a fact. They're lactose intolerant. I had no idea. Little hedge pigs. Also, today is Yorkshire Pudding Day, a day that honours the humble yet delicious Yorkshire pudding, a staple of the traditional British roast. We'll talk more about that later on. Crispy edges, soft doughy centre. It's British comfort food at its very best.
Yummy.
Yummy. I love a Yorkshire pudding. Also, it's World Play Your Ukulele Day, a day that celebrates the four-stringed instrument. Actually, the ukulele is a member of the guitar family. I had no idea, but it's also much, much smaller. It's teeny weeny guitar. So there you go, the ukulele. Right, let's start today's show, shall we? Today's fascinating facts. So today's fascinating facts. On this day in 1650 was the birth of Nell Gwyn, Eleanor Gwyn. Of course, she was the former orange seller at Drury Lane Theatre. She became a comedy actress. She was later mistress of Charles II, by whom she had two sons. On this day in 1901, it was the state funeral of Queen Victoria. Now, at the time of Queen Victoria's death, she was actually, she'd had 63 years of reign and 216 days. It was actually longer than that of any other British monarch and the longest of any female monarch in history. However, of course, as we know, on the 9th of September 2015, Queen Elizabeth II overtook Queen Victoria as the longest-serving monarch of the United Kingdom of Canada, Australia and New Zealand. And on this day, just talking about the late Queen, of course, who is much missed, on this day in 1976, the Queen opened the National Exhibition Centre near Birmingham. It is the largest and busiest exhibition centre in the UK, and it is the 7th largest in Europe. It's massive. And those are this morning's 6 o'clock fascinating facts.
Wake up smiling, it's that time of day. David Bull's here, let him lead the way. Monica's laughter brings the weekend cheer. From 6 till 10, you'll wanna sing it.
Good morning, a very good morning to you. 5 minutes past 6. Lots of comments actually on social media about our fantastic jingles made by Dave. Well, made by AI and Dave, but anyway. Thanks ever so much for your company this morning. I'm delighted to say, as you will have gathered from that jingle, that my guest this morning is the lovely Monica Price, health and wellbeing expert. Good morning.
Good morning, David. Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday to you. Now, are you a fan of hedgehogs?
I am. I love hedgehogs. And, you know, I did know about the milk. You can't give a hedgehog milk.
I didn't know
And I only knew that because my mum told me that. So,
I didn't know that. Now, I've always called them hedge pigs.
Well, have you? Why?
Yeah. I don't know, but then I found out that actually that is the correct name for them.
Oh, I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
well, it's one of the names
You
for
see,
them.
we need you in our world, David, to give us these fascinating facts.
Well, a hedgehog is a spiny mammal of the subfamily Erinacinae. There are 17 species of hedgehog in 5 genera found throughout parts of Europe, Asia and Africa. I've got another fact for you.
Oh, go on
They
then.
are also in New Zealand because they were introduced there, but there are no hedgehogs in Australia. That's a brilliant fact.
No hedgehogs at all?
Well, certainly none native to Australia.
No.
No living species native to the Americas either. It's interesting. They used to
them
be
here.
in North America. They became extinct in North America. They have changed very little over 15 million years. Here you go. The name hedgehog came into use around the year 1540. It comes from the Middle English of hedgy-hoggy, from hedge meaning hedge, and frequents hedgerows, and hoggy or hog because it has a pig-like snout.
Oh, Oh,
So
but they're
cute.
adorable.
They are,
aren't
but they're also
They are.
disease-ridden, I think.
they're not-
hedgehogs.
yes,
You're not
but-
meant to pick them up.
No, you're not meant to. No.
No.
But you know,
But, yeah.
people do.
Also, the immature animal spines normally fall out as they are replaced with adult spines. It's called quilling. And I know this because when I
Hence
was
the quill. Maybe.
Maybe, I don't know
don't
about that. I know this because hedgehogs also tend to get caught in netting, and I remember as a child cutting hedgehogs out of nets, and then I had to look after them, and when they're very distressed, they lose their quills. They lose their spines. And so you can tell when they're in trouble. But
They're in
anyway,
trouble.
so it's Hedgehog Day.
Happy Hedgehog Day, everybody.
Yeah, and also they hibernate. Their normal body temperature
Yes.
is 30 to 35. It decreases to 2 to 5 degrees C. So
Sounds like a very good idea at this time of year, doesn't it?
very good idea. Monica, there is so much in the papers.
Yes,
Let me just
I know.
bring you up to speed this morning. Let's just look, and this will make your blood boil and curdle this morning as it did with mine. My jaw dropped open, actually, when I read this headline. This is the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. Wait for this. We talk a lot about illegal migration on this programme. The Prime Minister, here's his brilliant new idea. He's going to ease the rules for illegal migrants. What? Yes, let me just tell you about this. Labour is watering down border laws designed to block illegal migrants from attaining citizenship, and also is going to stop them, forcing them to submit to scientific age checks. So they're repealing rules that were introduced by the Tories that meant that small boat arrivals could never become citizens. If you remember, this was under the illegal migration bill. So what that bill said, and I will remind you, if you came here on a small boat, you cannot claim asylum. That is the linchpin of that bill. You will be detained for 28 days and removed. Any future asylum claim is invalid. You have a lifetime ban. So Labour is going to revoke that legislation, and it is also going to revoke legislation which gave ministers the power to treat asylum seekers who refuse to undergo scientific age checks as adults. Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, says the move is a total capitulation to people smugglers and will make the UK the soft touch of Europe. Is he right?
Oh, absolutely. That's the scariest thing, actually, Dave, what you said about that. You know, it said, Mr Phillips said it will lead to a dangerous young men being placed with teenage girls and makes the UK the soft touch of Europe.
Yeah.
You know, and that, I think, said it's all. And in the this was I didn't know this statistic. In the first half of last year, more than 1,300 illegal immigrants were caught pretending to be minors after their cases were flagged by officials.
And so the real worry here is that it is important to differentiate between adults and children, and therefore I think it is only right that they undergo some sort of testing,
yes,
where you differentiate and say, are you an adult or are you a child? This is done across Europe in multiple countries, including France and Germany, and you can do that various ways. You can do an X-ray, you can do an MRI. Why would the government want to stop the mandatory use of that?
Exactly. Why, indeed? You know, that's got to be the question, isn't it? What, and how has he come to this decision? And how does he think this is going to help? You know, what's happening with the migrant situation in this country? You know, other countries are really clamping down on the immigration, and we're not. We seem to be just completely doing the complete opposite.
Well, I would agree. And also, what I find fascinating about Keir Starmer is that and we spoke about this yesterday, he just seems to have no sense of what the vast majority of the British public are thinking.
And what's actually happening. I don't think is he realising what's actually happening at the moment? How many immigrants are arriving, and how people are so worried about it. You know, there's always going to be a cause for people who are genuinely wanting to come to this country, of course, but we have to put procedures in place so that we can identify which ones are illegal and which ones are legal.
And if you remember, these powers to force people to have these checks were introduced in 2022 through the Nationality and Borders Act. So what is happening essentially is the people smugglers are saying to adults when they get here, say you're a child, that way you will be treated differently to being an adult.
Of course.
And of course, if we then don't ensure that they undergo rigorous testing that they are an adult or a child, then they slip through the net.
Exactly, and that's that is such a worry. I mean, has he not thought about that?
Clearly not.
Has he not thought, this is going to happen? Because, if somebody comes over, most of them don't have any kind of identification at all. So, I mean, it must be a terrible job for anybody that's trying to gather information about them when you've got no information about them at all. And how do you determine an age? Some people look really young, some people look older. So
and of course they've chucked the passport in the sea anyway, so you've no idea.
It's really scary, and I think it opens another gateway for them just to think, hey, this is an easy touch, let's come to England.
I mean, it's interesting. I will side with the Tories at this point because they did try very hard. Whether they actually succeeded or not remains to be seen. But the illegal migration bill, I thought, was a massive step forward. We then had the Rwanda bill that went through, and of course the first policy that Keir Starmer repeals was Rwanda. I do not understand that.
No.
To this day, I still don't understand that, because surely you need to get it through to see whether it is a deterrent.
And let's just see if it works.
Exactly.
And we spent so much money on it, David. How much money did that cost us, the taxpayers? It was millions of pounds. So at least, why did he just say, oh no, it was almost he saw, oh, it's Conservative, so I'm not going to do it. I mean, what other reason? Because if he'd at least tried it, give it 6 months or a year, try it. But he didn't even do that. He just stopped it straight away.
And there's another story this morning about Reform UK, which shows that it's ascendancy in the polls. I'll show you those polls a little later on this morning. Rupert Lowe has been very vociferous in the House of Commons. He's the MP for Great Yarmouth, and he said our asylum system is already as soft as a boiled maggot. And he's right. Zero tolerance is required. And he goes further, and I think he literally puts his finger on it. He says it's abundantly clear that thousands of men, are fooling the incompetent Home Office. They lie about their age, they lie about their sexuality and say that they're actually being persecuted, they lie about their religion, they lie about all sorts of things. And then what the Home Office is doing, and there's the poll that I'll show you, but what the Home Office is doing, the word of the migrant is taken as the truth. Why would you trust someone who has come here illegally when there are safe and legal routes into the United Kingdom?
Exactly. And, we discussed this before. I always say, if you are a legal immigrant, it's somebody who's absolutely just wanting to flee, whatever it is that's happening in the country.
That if you are being persecuted.
You would go through the proper channels, but why would you spend thousands of pounds, what is it, about average of £5,000 they pay to go across on a boat that they know that could cause them to die because they may or may not make it. So what does that tell you about that person? That tells you that, yes, they're fleeing something, but are they actually, or are they just trying to get into our country?
I honestly, my response, and I mean, obviously I'm used to reading headlines, but this morning when I read this headline, Prime Minister eases rules for illegal migrants, I imagine that most people around this country will have the same response I had, which was, you have to be kidding. So just going back to Keir Starmer, it is extraordinary. His poll ratings are in the toilet. This government is deeply unpopular, even with people like James Mathewson, who was on yesterday, who really can't defend the current government because it is indefensible what they're doing. You're seeing the rise of other parties, interestingly not the Conservatives, but rise of parties like Reform UK on the back of it. What do you think is going on with the British public and their psyche?
I think Starmer's completely lost touch with his people. I think he needs to remember that he's our Prime Minister, and people voted for him, David. People voted for him to be there, so he should be listening to his people, and he doesn't seem to be listening at all. Even if he doesn't agree all the time, he should listen to what his people have got to say and act accordingly. But he doesn't.
No, and I just want to bring you onto the Sunday Times because this links rather beautifully into that. This is basically a book, according to a new book that's come out. Labour despaired over, and this is the quote, HR boss Starmer. Keir Starmer's chief aide complained that Starmer behaves like an HR manager and not a leader. The Deputy Prime Minister, this is Angela Rayner, joked that Keir Starmer is so inept he could not run a bath. It's eviscerating.
And also,
it's true.
And also they said Starmer hired an acting coach to help overcome his aversion to addressing crowds and his wooden style. And he's got this I don't know, every time he speaks, you think, just is there anything in there? You're waiting for him to come a bit more personable, but he's just not.
No,
he's so
normally I think, what's in the fridge? What am I having for supper?
I would sack the acting coach because they're clearly having a good job, because nothing's changed about him at all. And I just think again, it says it all, really. I think people, and I know that some people that I know voted for him, and even they're now saying, they don't understand what he's doing. He isn't listening to what's happening to our country, and he isn't seeing what's happening to our country. So what is he doing? What is he doing?
Can we just see that poll again? Because I think this is fascinating. When you look at where we are, we're very much in the infancy of the government. When you have people like Angela Rayner, and this is all coming out in this book, she says she doesn't know who runs Labour, but it's certainly not the elected leader. Now, looking at that, Labour, if you remember under Tony Blair, this is their honeymoon period. This is when they're going to be at their most popular. And they are behind Reform UK. This is the Find Out Now poll at 23. Reform UK at 27. So if I was the Deputy Prime Minister, if I was Morgan McSweeney, if I was someone in the Labour Party, I would be very worried by that.
I would. And again, are they even looking at it? Are they look? It's almost as like he's just sort of, I'll just do what I like, and I'm not listening to anyone. But surely the people around him, David, are telling him what's going on. But again, he's not doesn't seem to be taking any action whatsoever. And every day we have headline stories, front page stories about what he's doing and how much damage he's causing to the country. Where's the good story about him? There isn't a good story, so surely if I was him, I'd be thinking, right, OK, come on, we've got to get a good story out here.
Well, let's just go back to what Chris Philp said. He said this is a total capitulation to people smugglers. It would make the UK the soft touch of Europe. It will lead to dangerous young men being placed with teenage girls, makes the UK the soft touch of Europe. Starmer is weak on borders. He's weak when it comes to protecting our borders, our children and our people. Let me just open that question up to you. And it got us thinking here at talkTV Towers this morning about Keir Starmer and about Chris Philp's comment. Do you now agree that the UK is the soft touch of Europe? The reason I ask that is you've got people like Maloney, who is trying desperately to sort out their migration problems. I think across Europe you're seeing countries who are drawing up the borders, even in the Schengen area, trying to work out what to do with the migration crisis. And yet here we are, Keir Starmer easing the rules for illegal migrants. So if you pop it over on a boat illegally, you will be able to claim asylum, which under the illegal migration bill wouldn't have been possible. So do you agree with Chris Philp that the UK is the soft touch of Europe? The number 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well at talkTV. So many messages coming in. Good morning, David. This is Michael in Birchington in Kent. Someone is pulling Starmer's strings. That's interesting. It is not a friendly state. Look east. He's not in charge.
No, I wouldn't say he was in charge. I wonder if he thinks he's in charge, but I don't think he's in charge. Because if someone was a leader, would take charge of this situation and at least address it. And interesting, just going back to the story in the Telegraph, Dave, where it says currently, those arriving who are classified as under 18s, they're also given school places.
That's right.
And they're housed by local councils rather than sent to migrant hotels. So again, it's that risk.
And also, as a community, you have no idea who is being settled in your own community, and then the pressure on schools that we talk about a great deal. Tony Tucker in Barrow-in-Furness says that, I believe, David, when a migrant claims to be a child, which you've just talked about, it costs $250,000 a year to keep them. I think that's what you're going on about, Tony. Thanks very much. This is Alan in Merseyside, one of our regulars. Good morning, Alan. I'm more convinced than ever, and that Labour and the Tories have absolutely no intention of stopping immigration. Let's hope Reform UK can stop it. Thanks for the moment, Monica. Also, after the break, I want to talk about this, because here we go again. Keir, this is the front page of the Express, actually. Keir edging us back into the EU. The same story in the Sunday Telegraph. Starmer is cozying up to the EU. Oh, I'll tell you what, why doesn't everyone come here illegally? And by the way, we're going to ignore Brexit. We're going to go back into an orbit around the EU. Your thoughts on that? That's all coming up next. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
It's just repeated failings time and time again. And until we do an inquiry into each individual case, we're not going to be able to get to the bottom of what's going wrong. So I don't accept the fact that because she wasn't Home Secretary at the time, we won't get an inquiry. That's not how it works. People have launched inquiries into previous government's actions.
Yeah.
And
well, the Post Office inquiry for a start. The Post Office inquiry is about all sorts of different governments who are responsible for it.
Yeah.
So that is completely a red herring, isn't it, to hide behind?
This is Talk 6:24, Sunday, February the 2nd. If you're in bed, I'd stay there if I was you. The Prime Minister, this is the headline on the front page of the Telegraph this morning. Prime Minister eases rules for illegal migrants, i.e. that it's going to be easier for you to come to the United Kingdom all at the same time whilst Europe is tightening their rules over who can claim asylum in their country. Now, I'm with Monica Price this morning. Good morning. We were talking just before the break about how tone-deaf Keir Starmer is, and you mentioned he'd had acting lessons to appear less wooden, and you want to fire the acting coach, which I think is absolutely the right thing to do. But let's just move on to another story this morning.
Okay.
So, again, for those people who voted for a change in the governance of this country to take back control of our money, laws and borders, and Brexit, which has never really been fully effected, front page of the Sunday Express this morning, Keir edging us back into the EU. Britain is in danger of being plunged into the worst of all worlds. Keir Starmer is meeting with EU leaders this week to forge a new relationship with Brussels. So, essentially, the Prime Minister is attending a dinner with EU leaders. It's the first time that has happened, actually, since Brexit. So he wants to have a closer trading relationship with the EU. Now, the one thing I know from my time in the European Parliament is the EU drives a very hard bargain, and they will do exactly what suits the EU. I think Keir Starmer thinks that now we can be all friendly with the EU. Well, that is not the case. So what they are saying is that they want to have a new security pact. By that, read into that, we want to have a common army across Europe. But secondly, in addition to all of that, they want our fish. Again, even though we fought really hard to get our fish back, they want European young people to live and work here as the price of a deal. And Keir Starmer seems quite OK with that.
You know, sometimes on a Sunday morning, sometimes you want to wake up to some very nice news, don't you?
Not it.
And it's not today. What's worrying me is that I think he will alienate Donald Trump by doing this. I think, our relationship, we have a very special relationship with the US, and everything that happens in the US will happen here in the UK. Give it 10 years, and I just think I know they're meeting, aren't they? Or they had a 45-minute phone call, but
they did.
I don't think he's going to get on.
It took a long time for him to ring him.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to have a good relationship, and I think that he and why is he doing this? What is he actually trying to achieve?
Well, because basically he's a Remainer.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah.
He wants to be back in Europe.
He's a leader, so he's making his choice.
So I think even as a pragmatic leader, you have to look at what Trump is doing. He's slapping tariffs on Canada.
Yes.
A close ally of the United States. He's slapping them on Mexico. He's slapping them also on China. He will slap them on the EU. Now, at the moment, we're in a rather interesting position where we haven't been mentioned. That's a good thing.
That is a good thing.
But if Starmer gets into bed with the EU, mark my words, there'll be tariffs on the UK.
Yeah, he will mention it. And again, everything he said he was going to do, which is why the people voted for him, where are the things that he said he was going to do? Has he actually done any of those things?
Well, he wasn't going to do anything. He didn't tell us what he was going to do.
He was just, but all those promises he made, all these lovely things he was going to do for our country, to make our country better. And every time any of them speak, this is the thing that I have, all they do is criticise the Conservatives or the Reform Party or anybody else. They don't take responsibility, and whenever they're asked questions by any journalist, they always say, "Oh well, when the Conservatives were in power, when Conservatives were in power, how about just trying to not keep saying that?"
Well, we inherited a mess.
Yes,
is
that's
their,
right.
is their
We
stock
inherited
line.
a mess, but they didn't inherit this mess.
So
this is a scary mess. If
well,
he
it
goes
is
into
at the
it.
front page of the Telegraph this morning. Starmer cozying up to the EU risk Trump trade war. Exactly the same story, really. But this intervention, there are massive fears that obviously if you move towards Brussels, then there would be a change of heart from Trump. Now, Kemi Badenoch, who, I mean, talk about a useless leader of the opposition, because really she should be on the front foot, and she's not doing a very good job in my humble opinion. But she, to be fair to her, she has set out 5 areas where Keir Starmer must not compromise with the EU. She says there must be no backsliding on free movement, which was the whole premise of Brexit. Yeah. Also, do not give away our fishing, which I would agree with. No rule taking. No dynamic alignment with the EU, and no compromise on the primacy of NATO. One of the biggest concerns I have is that that what Europe wants, or what the EU, the unelected bodies of the EU want, is they want a European defence force which will usurp NATO. And NATO is the cornerstone of our defence pact, and it is only right that countries pay their fair share, and I think Trump is right.
Yeah, I mean, in Trump, there's a lot we can learn from Trump, whether or not you like him or not. What I like about him is he loves his country. Does Keir Starmer love his country? There's a question for you.
I don't know the answer, actually.
Does he? I mean, and isn't that wrong, though? Whether or not you support Labour, Conservative or Reform Party, asking the question, does our leader, our Prime Minister, support our country? Leave that to your lovely listeners and see what they say.
It's a great question. I honestly don't know the answer to that. What are your thoughts, please? What do you think? I assume he does. Does he actually love this country? Let me know your thoughts on all of that, please. I mean, Mark Francois, who's the veteran Brexiteer, said it would be perverse if our Prime Minister sought to celebrate the 5th anniversary of Brexit by seeking to reverse it. There is no doubt in my mind that this sits very uneasily with Keir Starmer, and what the great and the good of the Central Labour Party want to do is essentially to move us closer to Europe, have dynamic European alignment. And we talked about this yesterday in terms of Brexit. We've got 6,500 laws from the EU still on our statute book. It's unacceptable.
Really? I didn't realise it was that many.
They basically took all the European laws, shoved it on British statute book under Retain EU law bill, and they said we'll go through each one of those and remove them as and when we can. Well, I think they managed to get rid of 300.
And that's it?
That's it.
Again, sometimes you just want to throw your hands up and say, what is going on? But somebody's got to take charge. And of course, at the moment, the person in charge, no one's trusting or even believing what he's doing. And that is the worry, I think, David, to be honest. I think that, people are looking to our Prime Minister to stop all of these things, and all he seems to be doing is driving us as a country further into the ground, in my humble opinion.
Do you think he's in charge? What about Angela Rayner's comment, which is that he's not in charge? She's basically saying, I don't know who is in charge, but it's not him.
Well, who is then? Someone's pulling the strings. It was a very good comment, but I just feel as a Prime Minister, he's just not leading the country. Even we were saying, even Liz Truss, was better, because even though she had a lot of hate and a lot of people were terrible. I think they were terrible to her, actually. And I think that she tried her best, and at least she tried. Whereas this man seems to be doing everything he can to make UK weaker,
but
rather
you see,
than stronger.
so for me, fundamentally, I think Liz Truss was misunderstood. The whole point of Brexit.
Yeah, she probably was.
Well, I think actually she had the right ideas.
Yeah.
And the idea of Brexit was that we can then basically divulge from the European Union.
Yeah.
So at the moment, we're slowly getting back our fishing rights, for example. We are slowly taking back control of everything we said we would do. If I was in charge, heaven help everyone, if I was in charge, I would cut tax. I would make sure that we are the Singapore on Thames. I would ensure that business comes to this country where they employ people, where we become this superpower, and then we spread that wealth around the country. It doesn't seem to be rocket science.
No, it's exactly. And if we know that, as we're talking here, surely he must know that. Surely. Or someone within his lovely, all his aides he's got, all these people around him. What are they saying to him?
I have no idea, but I tell you what lots of people are saying at home. Carol in Weymouth, good morning to you. Good morning, David. Yes, we are a soft touch with Labour and the do-gooders. There's no hope for us. Bring on reform. Can't come soon enough. Carol, thank you for that. Keith in Oswestry Street, good morning to you. Keir Starmer is not my leader. Dr. David, this one says, is the courting of the EU Starmer Blair's 2029 election plan for a second EU referendum to get them back into power? It was interesting,
That's
actually.
Interesting.
Well, yesterday there was another story
comment
in The Independent which said that, I can't remember the exact wording, but the majority of people favour a closer relationship with the EU. And then the overwhelming response from people on this programme and from this channel is, no, we don't. What we want is a proper Brexit.
Yeah. Exactly.
Which hasn't been given.
No, it hasn't. And, you know, and I this comment here on page 4 of the Sunday Express story, David, you know, we're committed to making Brexit work.
Rubbish.
I mean, that's the statement. No, I don't. That's the thing. I mean, you know, it's every day there's a story of what he's going to do, and it seems to be that every day the story that he wants to do, whether it's, you know, coming closer with the EU, or, you know, opening up our borders even more and making it easy for migrants, these are all the things that the majority, I would say, people in the country are against.
Yeah. I would agree. And actually, so many people getting in touch. Please do get in touch.
Yeah, be interested to see.
Do you agree with Chris Philp, by the way, that the UK is the soft touch of Europe? Why not? Everyone come here, because obviously Europe tightening their borders, so come to the United Kingdom. So many of you getting in touch this morning. This is Nick in Kent. Good morning to you. David and Monica, my blood is boiling.
Oh dear.
Keir is certainly a harmer by easing these laws. In my cynical mind, maybe he's easing these laws so these migrants can get citizenship and therefore they can vote. They will then vote Labour, as they all know this government has let them in and can live off the beleaguered taxpayer.
I think there's an element of truth in that, David, because, you know, I mean, how do you think anybody in Europe is looking at us at the moment and thinking, how are we as a country? You know, how in France, any of the European countries which are tightening up, they're very much saying, you know, like, we're not letting any more in, we're tightening our controls, we're going to have very strict border controls, and they must look at our papers and look at what we're doing and think, well, why are they doing that?
You know,
what's happening over there?
I think the real sadness for me here is that we have all the tools at our disposal, and we can actually make this great.
We can.
We've got people like Guy Verhofstadt, who appeared a couple of days ago saying Brexit has failed. It's time for the UK to rejoin the EU. Yeah, but Brexit hasn't worked because we've got a bunch of Muppets who are trying. I mean, literally a bunch of Muppets.
Yeah.
The Muppets would do a better job.
Yeah, that's right. But you see, that caller who that's actually, if you think about that, they will vote. The more he lets them in, they're going to vote for Labour, aren't they? They will, because he's let them in the country and given them a house, and you know, it's just. I think it's really sad that someone's actually not looking at this, because if we don't stop this, David, it will be too late.
It's already. I think we're almost at that tipping point.
I'm ever the optimist, but I just feel, you know, somebody must stop this. We've got to stop this at some point. At what point do we stop it?
So in my lifetime, this is what I find fascinating. I have never known so much anger out there, cross-party anger. I must admit that this country has no sense of direction. We have a completely rudderless country. We have no idea where we're going, and you can see this in what people are saying. Good morning to Jennifer. Good morning, David. This better be the end of Starmer now. He is putting our citizens at risk. He is supposed to be keeping us safe. What the hell is this man playing at? He's allowing us to be invaded by goodness knows who. He has to go now. I'm absolutely livid. Sorry for the rant. No, thank you, Jennifer, for getting in touch. Joanna in Salisbury, good morning to you. What on earth is the matter with our Prime Minister? These migrants pretending to be children will be in our foster system. They'll also, worse, they will be, in capital letters, in our schools. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. I'm asking this morning, do you agree that the UK is the soft touch of Europe? It certainly looks that way. The number 0344 499 1000. Really keen to hear from you this morning. What on earth is wrong with the Prime Minister? There's another good question. 0344 499 1000. Calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can also message us at talkTV. Who's running the country? Because it isn't the Prime Minister, is it? Well, if it is, he's not in touch with what the population is thinking. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. We'll take a break, but let me just tell you this before the break. So Rachel Reeves had this budget for growth, right? This budget for growth. It's been followed by the largest spike in businesses closing since lockdown. What a triumph. This is Weekend Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, good news. The Prime Minister is going to make it easier for illegal migrants to come to the United Kingdom. Whoopie-doo, isn't that brilliant news? Let me know your thoughts on that, please. 0344 499 1000. Chris Philp, absolutely enraged by this, saying, we are the soft touch of Europe. Is he right? Let me know. 0344 499 1000. Lisa, good morning to you. Lisa says, listen, David, good morning. Chris Philp can't talk. We were the soft touch under the Conservatives. It's their fault. That is where we are now. I would agree with that as well. This is Sean in Gloucester, one of our regulars. Good morning to you, Sean. How on earth can Brexit be a success when the vast majority of those in power never wanted it and are so against it? They have deliberately scuppered it to prove the people were wrong, and they knew better all along. They do well to remember who actually pays their wages and who votes them in. I'll tell you what, at the time of the next general election, there is going to be a huge reckoning coming down the line. Lots of you getting in touch. Let's take a couple of voice notes. James is on the line. Good morning, James.
Good morning, David. Now, I'm getting sick to death of these politicians, David. There's no accountability for none of them. They all sit there and they laugh and they joke at Prime Minister's questions, Starmer and Kemi Badenoch. They just stand there laughing. Makes me so angry, David. There's people out there that are really struggling. Unbelievable, David. Keep up the great work.
Thanks ever so much, James. I would agree with you. It is unbelievable. It's actually shocking on so many levels. Richard has also left a voice note. Good morning, Richard.
Morning, David. Quite simply, Keir Starmer is Jeremy Corbyn in a suit. Great show. Bye.
Thanks ever so much. I think he's right. I think Keir Starmer was the acceptable face of Labour.
Yes.
When people, and remember, people didn't vote for Labour, they voted away from the other parties, but they felt that it wouldn't be the sort of destructive left-leaning Labour, that this was almost an acceptable Labour.
Yes, and I think people now are realising that actually it's not an acceptable Labour. You know, I think you're right. When they left because they didn't want to have the Conservatives in power anymore. So who else to vote for? Let's vote Labour. And I think they were thinking that they were perhaps going to be a lot better than what they are. And you know, and I think that as well, there's always a danger when you vote like that, when they've not actually been voted because people really want to vote Labour, but just because they want the other party not to be in power anymore. I think maybe they've just fallen into this, and it seems to be all what they're doing. There doesn't seem to be any real plan. There's no real plan of what he's doing, which I think is really sad, though, David, for any young people who are trying to get into politics. Politics is a serious business, and it's an excellent career to get into. But anybody who's watching this,
I'm not so sure.
Well, this is it. But for other countries, it is. Why are we making? It should be. It's a very serious job. It's a very serious thing to
and we
get
have
into.
some
Why?
great young people who are really passionate, who are putting their faces forward, and I welcome that. So many of you getting in touch. I've never seen so many messages this morning, and just people
from that headline.
From the headline, but also just reading the copy. I mean, people are apoplectic. Colin Doughty, good morning to you. Good morning, David. Well, what we need right now is a coup, because this communist lot are hell-bent on transforming us into the socialist ideology that they share. Good morning, David. This is Maria from Worcestershire. Can the King actually dissolve Parliament, please? We need a general election. Great show. Thank you very much. I would agree. We need a general election. Actually, it's like buyer's remorse, isn't it? It's taken back within 28 days. It doesn't do what I said on the tin. Tristan in Bedford. Hello, David. It's clear as day that our crazy Prime Minister hates this country and has nothing but contempt for British people. And this so-called Prime Minister is importing voters and destroying the country with net zero. This government are just hated. He is deluded, or he hates us all. Is he deluded? Does he hate us? No. Actually, I don't know the answer to your question about whether he actually likes this country.
No, I don't, and isn't that's, as I said to you, that's a shame. We should know that our leader of our country likes his country. Ask that of the same question of the other countries. We certainly know we certainly know the answer with Donald Trump.
I think
he loves his country.
I mean, if you ask me the same about Kemi Badenoch, I would say she loves the country. Nigel Farage is obvious that he loves the country, and everything he does sort of says that. Let me just tell you about another story.
Okay.
This is also in the Telegraph. You'll be thrilled to know Rachel Reeves had this budget for growth, didn't she? This was a great reset, another great reset of Labour. It was then followed by the largest spike in businesses closing since lockdown. 4,500 companies shut down from October to December, marking the biggest quarterly increase in closures since the period of COVID-19 lockdowns. So the third quarter, Q3, of 2024-25 has become the worst month of voluntary liquidations in the UK since the fourth quarter of 2020-2021. Unsurprisingly, business groups say these findings are not a surprise. No, of course they're not a surprise. What does, again, you know, it's like...
Should we stand up, David, today?
Well,
I feel we need to stand up.
It's just promoting people who are clearly incompetent.
You've taken the words right out of my mouth. I read that and I thought, oh my goodness, you know, this is when business groups say the findings are not a surprise. I think they're keeping that on the low. But you know, it's very difficult for businesses. It's very difficult for business, and we should be helping businesses. We should be helping self-starters. You know, there's a huge amount of young businesses now, David, that are leaving the UK and taking them to other countries like Australia, New Zealand, China, Dubai, because they're just fed up with this country, and even, you know, Spain and our European partners. What does that say? It's saying that we haven't got it right. So how about you listen to the businesses, listen to them business leaders, and let them perhaps advise you on what would be a really good way to keep them in the country.
I got picked up this morning by a chap, a driver, good morning to you, who born and bred in Hackney, self-made, owns a company.
Great.
And he was just bemoaning it, saying, what's the point of carrying on? Because I've actually built a business. There's no point. I'm thinking of taking my wife and kids abroad.
See, I find that terribly sad, because what we're doing, we're not encouraging young entrepreneurs to stay in this country. We're building them up in this country, and then we're saying, right, off you go. We're not making it easier for them to stay in this country, and we're not making it a place they want to stay in. I think that's key. Why would you want your business to grow in this country?
So I own a small business. I had a big small business at one point. I just get the sense that no one in government has any business experience. They have no idea that, and I've said this repeatedly, the SMEs, the small medium enterprises, take the risk. You put your own money in. You employ people. It is a major headache the whole time. You are constantly worried about feeding the beast, making sure you have the money at the end of the month to pay the staff on payroll. And if you don't take your salary.
Yeah, and you don't have holiday pay, and you don't have sick pay, you know, and you do it because you love whatever it is you've decided to go into business for. And when you see, you know, when I read this, I mean, I just was exasperated by it, to be honest, David. And again, it doesn't say that she's inept. It doesn't know what they're doing. And that's, again, it's worrying that we've got people in charge who seem to appear to not know what they're doing. That's worrying.
Monica, thanks for the moment. After the break, I'm going to be telling you the Labour Party is also facing an investigation over indirect funding from a group in the European Union. Also, Reform UK is ahead of the Tories in every single major poll for the very first time. I'll bring you all the very latest on that after this break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high, and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, and can you please be clear? Will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence, and she has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk Weekend Breakfast. I'm joined by the lovely Monica Price this morning, who's just brought shortbread, actually, but that's beside the point. Loads of you getting in touch this morning, absolutely apoplectic about what is going on. This is great. Good morning. Wouldn't it be lovely to wake up and find this government was just really a bad dream? Unfortunately, it is not. And we should vote on who is allowed to vote. Good morning, David. Those people asking, loads of you talking about the King needs to dissolve Parliament. Also, this is Margaret in Yorkshire. Good morning to you. What Starmer doesn't realise is the migrants coming into the UK will not just vote Labour, they will take over the Labour Party eventually. One of you, Vinny, good morning. Vincent says, where is Lammy? Well, let me just tell you where Lammy is. He is obviously Foreign Secretary. He's racked up amazing amount of air miles. This is according to Guido. Since he has taken office, he has burnt through nearly £1 million in flights alone. His prices trip was to New Delhi in India and Vientiane in Laos, which totaled 266,000. Now, I don't mind that, he's Foreign Secretary, but at the same time, do you not remember they lambasted the former Conservative government saying you're taking too many flights?
Yes.
He spent far more. When Liz Truss, I think, was Foreign Secretary, she spent 300,000. He's already on 900,000.
And how... 900,000?
Yeah, and also
That's
the
crazy.
Chagos Islands. I'm not sure they're in very safe hands with David Lammy in charge. Do you?
No, I don't.
And also, he's meeting Marco Rubio actually today to talk about the future of the Chagos Islands. I hope the US actually says this is not acceptable.
No.
You know, this is these are islands of strategic importance.
Yeah.
Keep all those messages coming in, please. If you are just waking up, good news: the Prime Minister is going to let it make it easier for illegal migrants to come to this country. And if that wasn't enough to make your blood boil this morning, he's also Keir Starmer's going to make us take us closer to Europe as well, because that is exactly what we didn't vote for. Keep all those messages coming in, please. Chris Philp says, this makes us the soft touch of Europe. Is Chris Philp right? Your thoughts, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X at talkTV. Now, something seismic is going on in the polls because Reform UK is now ahead of the Tories in every major poll for the first time. This is a story in the Telegraph this morning. Reform UK has pulled ahead of the Conservatives in every major poll for the very first time. In 7 of the latest surveys of voting intention by the major pollsters, Nigel Farage's party is ahead of the Conservatives by at least 1 point. They have added, this is the Find Out Now poll. So as you can see, Reform UK on 27, 6 points ahead of the Conservatives. Labour on 23, according to that poll. Lib Dems nowhere to be seen at 11, and the Greens at 10. The party is actually, if you remember, at the general election, it won 14.3% of the popular vote, got 5 seats, which shows the idiocies of our electoral system. But anyway, since then, they've added 10 points to their support. The Conservatives are static where they are. What's going on, Monica?
Now, well, you know, again, look at that. You know, they say that Labour is still ahead in the aggregate poll of polls, but the government's popularity has collapsed. So we know it has. You know, it has. There's no doubt about it. And
I could have told them
you
that.
know, exactly. We don't need a poll to know that. And you know, and the government is now drawing up plans to fight the Reform Party. You know, well, yeah, I think you should. You know, again, I think people are disillusioned. I think that people were expecting something better of the Labour Party, and I think all they've got is Keir Starmer. So is it the Labour Party or is it the leader that's...
Well, that's what I asked exactly that question yesterday, and people came back saying that it's both, actually. It's a lack of direction, it's a lack of transparency, it's no policies, and the policies they do have are the policies we don't want.
And also, is it a lack of just, you know, credibility? You know, who are these people that are in the Labour Party who've got these very important positions? Are they competent and qualified to do that position? You know, you have to be...
I think short answer is no.
Yeah, well, you have to be... it's like anything. It's like take a job, look at the CV. You know, are they qualified and able to take on this role? It's a very important role. And I just think, again, you know, going back to what we were saying earlier before the break, I think it's really horrible for the young that they must be becoming disillusioned with politics. If you were a young person, you think, oh, I'm not going to go into politics. And I think that's a great shame.
So
I do.
Let me just tell you very quickly actually about an investigation that Labour is facing, or a potential investigation. There is indirect funding from the EU whilst it was in opposition. This is another incredible story. The Electoral Commission is looking at a donation to an affiliated Labour organisation as a potential regulatory concern. This is a donation from the Foundation for European Progressive Studies, a branch of the Party of European Socialists, which went to the Labour-linked Fabian Society. There was a 30,000 quid donation that was given. They have been fined, by the way, by the European Union for what they have been doing, as far as I can see. And the question is, what happened here? And also, just in terms of our electoral law, you do have to declare anything over £500 to members' associations. They must come from permissible sources, and you need to also report anything over 11,180. There are big questions here about what went on, and of course, just bearing in mind, Labour actively campaigned against Donald Trump in the United States.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So 30k, I'm still reeling from that fact.
Just to be clear, and I just want to be very careful here, the Authority for European Political Parties and European Political Foundations levied a 30,000 fine against the FEPS for this breach. I mean, it is extraordinary that the Labour Party could be under investigation in the first place.
And it's only, how long have they been in power?
Not very
7
long.
months? 7 months? Is
I'll
it?
look it up.
Yeah, that's right.
7 years.
I think you definitely need a cup of tea and a shortbread this morning if you're waking up to these lovely newspapers this morning.
I definitely do. Loads of you getting in touch this morning. Tony, good morning to you. 5 years of Labour will finish the UK. There will be nothing left here. The money, the brains, they're all heading abroad. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. Chris Phillips says the UK is now the soft touch of Europe when it comes to migration, when Keir Starmer is actually going to make it easier for illegal migrants to stay here. Also, they don't believe that you should test people who say they are a child as to whether they are an adult. I'll tell you what, why don't we give them loads of money? Why don't we allow them to have homes and be in schools and all the rest of it? It's absolute nonsense. Let me know your thoughts on all of the above, please. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Also, keep all your messages coming in. We'll continue with the top stories after this break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Don't go anywhere. A very good morning to you.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to you just after 7 o'clock on Sunday, February the 2nd. I'm David Bull, and this is Weekend Breakfast. Great news for you today. Of course, it is Hedgehog Day today, a day that raises awareness and of these spiky little creatures and their habitat. I'll tell you what, hedgehogs actually like to sleep most of the time. Lucky them. And also, here's a fact, they're lactose intolerant. Also, this is a really good one. I quite fancy one of these later. It's Yorkshire Pudding Day today, a day that honours the humble yet delicious Yorkshire pudding. It's a staple, obviously, of the traditional British roast. The question is, should you have it with just with any meat, or is it only beef? Anyway, in Suffolk, where I'm from, they have it with everything. Yorkshire puddings with everything. The crispy edges, soft doughy centre, British comfort food, thank you, at its best. Also, it's World Play Your Ukulele Day today, a day celebrating the four-stringed instrument. It's actually a member of the guitar family, but it's teeny weeny. Crikey, that takes me back to Tight Fit 1983. The Lion Sleeps Tonight, I think it was. It Tight Fit? I think it was then. Let's move on to today's fascinating facts. Today's fascinating facts. So this some new fascinating facts. On this day in 1665, British forces captured New Amsterdam, the centre of the Dutch colony in North America. The trading settlement on the island of Manhattan was then renamed from New Amsterdam to New York in honour of the Duke of York, who of course was his governor. On this day in 1914, the very first Cub Scout pack was formed in England, the first pack being in Robertsbridge in Sussex, although the Cub Scout movement wasn't formally founded until 1916. By the end of that year, there were 6,000 Cub Scouts. And on this day in 1920, it was the birth of Huey Green. Do you remember Huey Green? You have to be a certain age, I think, to know who Huey Green was. He became a household name with TV shows such as Double Your Money and Opportunity Knocks. And those are today's fascinating facts at 7 o'clock.
Waking up with laughter, coffee in the air. David Bull and Monica, they make the perfect pair. From 6 till 10, you know they're our best friends.
Well, a very good morning to you just after 7 o'clock, 5 minutes past 7 on Sunday, February the 2nd. I'm joined by the lovely Monica Price. Good morning.
Good morning, David. Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday. Now, you're obviously far too young, but do you remember Huey Green?
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah, when I was a little girl. Yeah, I remember Opportunity Knocks.
Well, I guess it was the first talent show, wasn't
Yeah, it was. I used to, and was it on a Sunday, actually?
Well, I honestly don't know.
No, because you're too young. But I think it was. And anyway, whatever day it was, yes, I do. I remember watching it religiously. It was kind of sit round the TV and watch Opportunity Knocks. Yeah, it was great.
Now, we've been obviously talking about all the big stories of the day. We've also been talking about hedgehogs because it's actually Hedgehog Days. I've now lost the thing. But I've had quite an interesting message from someone about their dogs. Oh, here we are. This is Francis from Wilton, a regular Francis. He was upset because I didn't say he was a regular. I've got a fun story about hedgehogs. We used to keep our Jack Russell Terriers in an outside kennel with the door open in the day. In the warmer months, they would then act really strangely, really protectively of something. I think they were protecting hedgehogs from badgers.
Oh, how really sweet is that?
Really sweet. Yeah. It's about the only sweet thing that's going on this morning if you are just waking up. Let me just show you this headline, but if you're in bed, you might want to put your head under the pillow again. Front page, the Prime Minister is going to make it easier for illegal migrants to come to this country. Yes, what a brilliant idea that is, Keir Starmer. Labour is going to water down border laws designed to block illegal migrants from obtaining citizenship. You may remember this is all part of the illegal migration bill that was passed not very long ago, where the people coming here who said, look, I'm actually a child, and the border force officials were saying, well, you don't look like a child. And so the idea was that you would subject them to scientific tests, and you would know by things like x-rays of their hands whether they were a child or an MRI. There are ways that you can date people. They can look, for example, at your teeth, at your molar teeth. So the Home Office is repealing rules introduced by the Tories that meant small boat arrivals could never become UK citizens. And essentially what that legislation said was, if you come here on a small boat, you will be detained and you will be removed. You will never be allowed to apply for British citizenship. Now, the Labour government, in its infinite wisdom, think they're going to get rid of it because that's a brilliant idea. Not.
Yes, and and as you said, dentistry, even if they say, oh, we can't afford, there's no money to do all these scans, like you were saying, the bone density scans, the MRI scans, all you have to do is open their mouth and look at their teeth. I mean, but it is, though, isn't it? It's a good way to do it. And also
how much is it?
And how much, exactly, come on. And, well, in the scale of things, it's nothing compared to what could happen, later on down the road, and that's what we're worried about.
What I still can't get my head round is the Prime Minister, who is deeply unpopular, the Labour government is deeply unpopular, and there is no sense of understanding the mood of the nation.
Yes, and he doesn't seem to give any interviews about that, does he? Have you noticed? Other prime ministers in the past, if you had even Margaret Thatcher, or it doesn't matter what party you are, Blair, Nigel Farage, they will speak.
He's not prime minister yet.
And they'll speak and defend. Yes, they'll speak and defend. Whereas Keir Starmer just doesn't seem to speak out. He just seems to ignore. And I think that's going to be to his detriment, actually. He's not listening to his people.
Mentioned this. Last year, in the first half of last year, more than 1,300 illegal migrants were caught pretending to be children. I'm a child, right? 3/4 of unaccompanied minors, and this is why they want to be kids, they are then granted asylum compared with half of all adults. Yeah. They are then given school places, they're housed by the local council, housed basically next to you. So, Starmer going to make this easier? I mean, people will be apoplectic.
Yes, I think people who are waking up today will need a lot of sugar in their tea, because I don't know how and why he's done this. Well, I think we do. We've been having lots of lovely callers who are alluding to the fact that they're coming over, and of course they're going to vote Labour. If he lets them in, they've got more Labour supporters. But I think for us, people who are living in this country, there's a real fear, and I don't think he's listening to that fear. And if we do voice anything, then we're seeing, you can't say that because, you're going to be seen as somebody who's against the migrants. And it's nothing to do with that. It's about having policies and procedures in place to ensure our safety for our country. And I don't see, why are we being sort of put down about that all the time? Every other country does it.
Every other country.
But when we do it, oh no, you can't do that. And it doesn't make any sense. And I think everybody in this country will be waking up to the headlines today, David, and be really shocked.
I mentioned this earlier. Rupert Lowe, the Reform MP for Great Yarmouth, says our asylum system is already as soft as a boiled maggot. Zero tolerance is required. It is abundantly clear that thousands of males are fooling the incompetent Home Office through their lies about their age, their sexuality, their religion, and more. The word of the migrant is taken as the truth, the benefit of the doubt, regularly implemented as official policy. Now, Chris Philp this morning, the former minister, he says this shows that Labour is a soft touch. Would you agree that this makes the UK look like the soft touch of Europe? That's what Chris Philp says. 0344 499 1000. I'm really keen to hear from you this morning. Calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X at talkTV. Now, I was just really interested to see what the government says. They say it was a shambles that we inherited, blah, blah, blah. Labour says its reforms will deter crossings by introducing significant jail terms for migrants who delay being rescued. They've got a border security bill which has been unveiled. They're going to introduce an offence of endangering life at sea, and so on and so on. It's just not enough, and it's not going to quell the anger out there.
No, and all those things you've just read out there, David, those things are, are set to protect us as a country, and yet Front News, he's doing completely the opposite. So, where does he stand? Someone needs to interview him and ask him these direct questions, and he has to be accountable for it.
I don't I don't know where he stands. Let me just tell you what's going on in other countries, and I've been watching this. Immigration is a major problem across Europe. I alluded to Giorgia Meloni and, of course, her attempts to stop illegal immigration into her country. Well, Germany, and this is quite something when you read the detail, Germany has blocked a bill calling for tougher rules on migration. There was a very close vote in Parliament. So essentially, this came to a head in the European Parliament. The reason this is interesting is on Wednesday, they narrowly passed a resolution about tough restrictions, saying, right, we need to introduce tough restrictions on immigration. It was controversial because it was brought forward by the CDU, by the Conservative Opposition, CDU-CSU, but it was backed by a number of other parties, including what they call the far right, that is the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland. So they came together, that was passed, saying we have to sort out illegal migration. Well, obviously, all the social liberals went absolutely apoplectic. Now, the bill calling for tougher rules was actually voted down. It was a very close vote. It was 350 to 338. But what we're now seeing is a realignment of politics within Europe. So for the first time, this has never happened post-war, that you've got a right-wing party sort of teaming up with a party that isn't of the right. And so I think you can see the sense of mood changing across Europe.
Yeah, and that again, isn't that scary? They're watching us. They're watching to see what we're doing. And what do you think they're saying? What do you think the leaders...
How not to do things?
Yes, yeah. I mean, they must be looking at us and thinking, why? Who is this man that's supposedly is in charge of our country, and yet he doesn't seem to be leading us in any shape or form? And I think that's, again, not only is it terrible that he's doing that, but I just think it's a great shame that he's not reading the mood of the country, reading the mood of his people, and he really needs to do that.
He really does. Let me take you through the front pages this morning, because we got a bit sidetracked with the jaw-dropping headline. Let's start with the Sunday Telegraph, though. We've dealt with that story. The Prime Minister eases rules for illegal migrants. There is then another story here. Sir Keir Starmer cozying up to the EU risks Trump trade war. Now, as we know, Donald Trump is imposing tariffs on Canada, on Mexico, also on China. The UK hasn't been actually mentioned at all, so everyone's sitting in the UK thinking, well, hopefully it's not us because Trump likes us. But he says he's going to put tariffs on the EU. Now, this says Keir Starmer has been warned that cozying up to the European Union risks dragging Britain into a damaging tariff war with Donald Trump. Now, Keir Starmer is in Brussels. It's the first time that a UK leader has met with the European leaders since Brexit. The front page of the Sunday Express, same story. Keir edging us back into the EU. Britain is in danger of being plunged into the worst of all worlds. So if Keir Starmer gives up our Brexit freedoms and alienates Donald Trump at the same time. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has accused him of trying to reopen the Brexit deal. There's no doubt in my mind that essentially Keir Starmer is a Remainer. He wants us back in the EU. He wants us to have dynamic alignment. And my biggest worry about this, he says we need to have some sort of common defence policy.
Yeah.
Well, we've got NATO. But the price of that common defence policy will be our fish. It will be everything, access to everything the EU wants, and the EU will drive a very hard bargain.
They will. And it says, the headline, we're committed to making Brexit work. That's it. You don't need to say any more, do you? Because that's clearly where he's going. And again, as you said, you know, David, you know, we fought long and hard to get our fishing rights back again for us. I mean, there'll be people there, fishermen, they have a hard enough life anyway, and you know, they fight long and hard. Our waters are being overfished, and our poor fishermen have appalling conditions, and they're constantly being put down by this government, it seems. And you know, and they're a lifeline. You know, we forget this. They provide our food.
And also, remember, we haven't actually got full control of our fishing rights still.
No, we haven't.
We still haven't.
Yeah.
So it changes every single year. We're tantalisingly close to it. But if you talk to people in the fishing industry, like June Mummery, who was an MEP with me, she's still absolutely livid at the fact that we have quotas. I mean, the whole point of Brexit was that, fine, we can give quotas, but they should be in our gift to give them, not the EU nicking them.
Yes, exactly. And that's the thing. When the EU, you know, with the EU, there is this worry, as there was before, that they're just going to take everything and they make their own rules and then they tell us what we need to do.
Yeah. So that's the front page of the Sunday Express this morning. I told you it was bad news this morning. The Sunday Times has a really interesting article. Labour despaired over HR boss Starmer. We keep saying who's in charge. So Keir Starmer's chief aide complained he behaved like an HR manager and not a leader. The Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, joked that Keir Starmer is so inept he couldn't run a bath. This is according to a new book revealing the concerns about his leadership. Now, the Chief of Staff, that's Morgan McSweeney, he's the architect of Labour's landslide election victory, privately compared the leader, Keir Starmer, to a human resources worker. He's spot on.
Yeah, and, you know, Starmer hired an acting coach to help overcome his aversion to addressing crowds and his wooden style. And he's very wooden. And I say, sack the coach. Sack the acting coach, because he or she didn't do a good job, you know, because he's so wooden, David. You know, surely, you know, people, having an acting coach is not uncommon. That's fine. You know, you to learn to speak, absolutely. But for goodness sake, somebody must be telling him how wooden he is, because it's clearly not working.
Well, you can also see he likes the script, and he doesn't like to deviate from the script. He doesn't like having questions asked of him. So that's the front page of the Sunday Times. This morning. There's another story here, which is China saw Andrew as a valuable channel. Really interesting. The Duke of York was viewed by the Chinese state as a valuable communication channel, according to newly released court papers. MI5 questioned Prince Andrew's most senior aide about their clandestine relationship with an alleged Chinese spy. This is Yang Tengbo in 2013. Prince Andrew is the gift that Prince Andrew is the gift that keeps on giving, isn't it? I mean,
no, things just keep coming up about him. And you know, I think it's a great shame for our royal family. You know, I'm a big royalist, and I just think it's every time these stories come up, it's again for people who are not royalists, they're going to look, you know, why should they have this position? You know, do we need a monarchy? All those questions come up again, and I think it's a great shame, really. But you know, something needs to be done. But what do we do? Because it seems sort of every other month something comes out about him.
I think it will play out. I mean, it's interesting that Andrew met Yang Tengbo at a reception during the Shanghai Grand Prix.
Yes.
He became a confidant. He became far too embroiled with him, in my humble opinion. And actually, Yang Tengbo was stopped by counter-terrorism police at Heathrow in 2021. They got his mobile, his laptop. There was a crib sheet for a call between Yang and someone called TD. Turns out TD is the Duke, Prince Andrew.
Right, OK.
And China's ambassador to London, Zheng Ziguang, regarded Andrew as a valuable communication device. And obviously China had played Prince Andrew. Let's move on to the Mail this morning. Police file raises a new doubt over Letby guilt. This is another story that made me stop and read it twice.
Yes.
There are fresh doubts raised about the conviction of killer nurse Lucy Letby last night, with the bombshell revelation of police notes suggesting the jury had been misled over the key evidence. The documents raised serious questions over the courtroom claim. Now, if you remember, they kept saying Letby was the common link between the deaths of all these children. It then transpires an expert cited by the prosecution prepares to go public to say, actually, my research has been misrepresented in court. A growing number of experts have voiced fears about the evidence against the nurse. As we know, there has been no appeal. It has been rejected. And this story, however, refuses to go away. In previously undisclosed police notes obtained by a website called Unheard, there is a discrepancy between the initial analysis of suspicious incidents at the hospital and what the jury was actually told. When the chief prosecution witness, this is Dr. Dewey Evans, originally looked at the 28 cases, this is the jaw-dropping line, Letby was absent for 10 of them, more than a third. But the jury were not told that.
That's quite. I mean, let that hang in the air.
Indeed.
Because that's quite shocking, isn't it?
And they were told, the jury were not told that, but the jury were told the one common denominator, and I remember this vividly, in the unexpected deaths and collapses was Letby.
I think that one's going to get worse and worse. I think we'll see more of that one, David, to be honest. That's the story.
And also, if there is a miscarriage of justice, that is appalling.
Appalling on every level, for that nurse. You just don't know, do you? We're not going to know until someone investigates that very thoroughly.
And if he does go public, then obviously there's going to be an increasing clamour for a retrial.
Yes.
Let's move to the Observer now. Betting giants under fire for ads targeting at-risk gamblers. Another shocking story. Gambling companies in Britain could be forced to overhaul their advertising practices. A betting firm was ruled to have unlawfully targeted a problem gambler. This is Sky Betting and Gaming. They sent this man personalised marketing without consent. They knew, well, allegedly knew, that he had a problem gambling habit, and they're not allowed to target those people, and yet, according to the Observer, he was spending all his wages. He was labelled, instead of a problem gambler, he was labelled as a high-value customer. So betting giants under fire for ads targeting at-risk gamblers. The Mirror, this is the funeral of Lyndon Nolan being carried to the church in a rather fetching pink coffin. There's a big headline here, crackdown on AI child abuse. This is a really stunning story, actually. Yes. Advances in AI are fueling a wave of sex abuse against children. The number of bot-generated sexual abuse image cases rose 380% compared with the previous year. The government has unveiled a crackdown to tackle computer-generated images of abuse. New laws announced today will outlaw AI tools designed to generate child sexual abuse materials. Possession of disgusting AI paedophile manuals which can be used to abuse youngsters will carry terms of up to 3 years behind bars. A new offence will also be created, meaning predators who run websites where paedophiles share material and get twisted advice can be jailed for up to 10 years. Good. And also Border Force will be given powers to unlock phones. The front page of The Sun, this is about the Traitors. The Traitors winner, Jake Brown, apparently was confronted by his wife. Apparently he'd grown close to a female colleague. And I like this one. Front page of the Daily Star. I can't come to work, boss. The weather has twisted my melon. That's what I say all the time. Weather watchers are predicting a surge in sickies as 3 months of thunderstorms trigger crippling migraine attacks for millions. Turn to page 5. Hang on. Got to go to page 5. Right, millions of us could miss work, apparently. With storm migraines over the next 3 months. Apparently the UK could face wild weather fronts all the way into May. Apparently this will cause havoc in the workplace. 13% of workers are telling this particular survey that they suffer from painful headaches due to the falling atmospheric pressure.
Well,
How are your melons?
My melons are great, thank you.
Good. Just checking.
You've got to check on a Sunday morning.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what my boss is going to say if I say I can't come to work. The weather has twisted my melons.
Exactly. I mean, you do get headaches. I mean, I get if it's going to be snowing, for instance, I do. That's the time when I get a headache. If it's just about to snow, I do. Yeah. I can't. And I don't have headaches very often. And when I do, I think, oh, it might be snowing. It looks like it might snow. And often the case.
I love that.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So rely on me. That's your weather.
Right, Monica, call me when it's going to snow.
Exactly.
We'll take a break. After the break, I want to read you 2 emails. One is from a midwife in the NHS talking about the levels of immigration into this country and the strains that it's putting on her. She's just messaged that to me. I also have been sent another email from a receptionist in a doctor's surgery, which is just totally shocking. I'll tell you both of those stories after this break. This is Weekend Breakfast.
government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, and can you please be clear? Will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence. She has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk. The hot topic of the day, immigration. Keir Starmer is going to make it easier for illegal migrants to settle in this country. That's right. And of course, you don't have to prove that you're not. You don't have to prove that you're not a child, if that makes sense. So they're going to repeal parts of the illegal migration bill, which was only just passed. So many of you getting in touch this morning. Let's take a call. Stephen is in Marira in Spain. Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning, David and Monica. Yeah, this is an interesting story. I'm more concerned about them relaxing the rules for under-30s. Whilst that allows our young people to go to Europe, Spain is just granting settled status to nearly 1 million of migrants who've come in across the Mediterranean.
Settled status?
Many of them, settled status. They're going to just allow them settled status. Most of those are under 30. You see them on the streets selling stuff. Those people will then be eligible to come into the UK under an under-30s agreement.
Do you know, I hadn't thought about that.
Yes.
You're right.
And that is going to be a problem with the under-30 free movement.
Monica?
Yes. Do you know, I hadn't thought about that either. You know, that you're absolutely right. If you think about that, especially what he's looking to try and get us back into the EU. Is there a plan going on here?
Well, Stephen, what's the response in Spain? Because they're a very patriotic country. They also, I know this from my time over there, they have huge problems and pressures on housing. Their young people can't be housed. Same problems that we have over here. Of course, they have a bigger landmass. What's the response from the Spanish?
Well, where I am on the Costa Blanca, it's fairly affluent and they benefit from the tourism. I think the problems are in the towns, Madrid, Barcelona, the more settled towns, Spanish towns, Valencia, where there is a pressure on housing. So really it's not the tourists causing the problem. But the immigrants generally flock where there's money, like in London and other places. So what's happening is all these migrants are going around the tourist areas trying to sell stuff or do whatever they do illegally. So Spain, they're not causing directly a problem with housing. I think Spain would be quite happy if they just went across the channel and worked in the UK. Same with France and Holland and Germany, because it's just an open door to anybody under 30. So that's the problem I see happening. These people will just migrate legally across the channel.
Crikey. Thank you ever so much, Stephen. Really good to talk to you. Stephen in Marira, there, lovely part of the world, actually, in the Costa Blanca. There are two stories I want to tell you this morning. I'm just mindful that I have to take a break, but let's just do this one from Tracy. Thank you so much for this message. David, I'm a midwife in the NHS. Almost daily, we pay for all of the interpreters for non-English speaking and asylum seekers living in our local hotels. We also have to invest a lot of extra time on these women and their families. The women and their partners complain about the food and their mental health. One interpreter told me that during our consultation, the husband constantly reminded the wife to say she was suffering from depression and not eating, so they could be housed. I think he forgot the interpreter could understand everything he was saying. My 35-year-old son is self-employed, still at home, desperately trying to get on the housing ladder. He stands no chance against the illegal migrants. It's very similar to the other story. It's shocking. It's a waste of resources. They're playing the system. They know what to say, and we are idiots.
That's the thing. I think they know what to say, and they are playing the system. And again, at what point does it stop, David? At what point are we actually going to say this can't carry on? And you know, like they've just said, you know, they obviously clearly forgot that the interpreter could understand exactly what was going on. But it's easy, you know, if that's the way they can get a house, they'll know how to do it. So someone's telling them, they're being told these things, how to work the system.
Let me tell you this one, and thank you so much for sending this email, which came to me via someone else. David, I'm a receptionist in a doctor's surgery. The NHS is totally overwhelmed with appointment requests for the small amount of appointments we actually have. We have 13,000 patients for 20 to 30 appointments a day. Partner doctors only take phone calls as and when they want. Unfortunately for them, it's all about money and not about care. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. David, could we stop giving an NHS number to anyone that drops onto our shores, legally or illegally? I'll tell you why. They think they can come in for any minor ailment. Maybe what we should do is give a £5 to £10 appointment fee. It would stop them ringing every day and taking appointments for the whole families. This is where this gets particularly interesting. They refuse to go to pharmacy first. They then book the appointments. They bring their family with them and they expect a prescription. They then, David, go home for months at a time. They then ask for 3 months of prescriptions to go back to their home countries. They get letters whilst they are at their home country from doctors abroad, come back to us, and then expect us, the NHS, to pick up the cost of the recommended treatment. Once we give them the prescription, they disappear again back to their home country on holiday. On top of this, we are paying translator costs. This is not acceptable. They should be charged to the patient if they cannot bring someone with them who cannot speak English. David, I thought I would pass this on. I am a very tired, underpaid, abused doctor's receptionist.
That's such a sad story, and I agree. I've often thought, David, for a long time now, we've got to start charging. We have to start charging for patients that are clearly just using the system. But how do you work that out? That's the thing, isn't it? That's the fundamental question with that. But I do believe we need to start, as the NHS goes, we need to start charging because people are abusing the system, and our NHS is struggling. And something needs to be done.
It's so complicated, this, and then the counter-argument is if you are desperately poor, then you tend to stay away.
That's
and then you
the
wouldn't
thing.
pay the
and then you
£10.
won't pay, exactly.
And then elderly people already don't go and see the doctor because they're so worried about bothering the doctor. But here we are, blatantly being used by illegal migrants to come in to abuse the system, get your drugs. I was going to use the B word, disappear off to your home country and flicking two fingers at our system. It's got to stop. Let me know your thoughts on all of that, please. 0344 499 1000. The lines are red hot, as you can imagine. Get all of those messages in, please. Clearly, Keir Starmer's message to all of us this morning is illegal migrants are welcome. No, they're not. This is Weekend Breakfast.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm having some shortbread. Thanks. Thanks, Monica. Really
You're
nice.
welcome.
Very nutritious. Good morning, David. This is Tony. Good morning to you. You're an integral part of our weekend mornings. That's very sweet. Because your show delves into the truth of the United Kingdom. This Labour government is more anti-British than the BBC. Why are the public so ignored by it? Because they pander to minorities getting into power and staying in power. That is their sole aim, and they expect the majority to stay at home in elections in apathy or to be quiet. The minority votes win elections now. Let me get this right. David, this is Bruce. Good morning to you. So we pay immigrants with our money to come here, to live in our houses. All the government's doing is buying votes and replacing us in reality. How about they actually do something, anything, for us, the UK people of the UK, something that is positive, something that actually would benefit us. Otherwise, we need to get this this clown out. Bruce, thank you for that as well. Oh, in terms of that £10 charge that you mentioned, yes. Monica, this is Dimitri. Good morning, Dimitris. Dimitri. Good morning. Here in Cyprus, there is a €10 charge at A&E because of abuse, and now only urgent cases go. We carry ID cards here. Oh, we're going off. Tony Blair wants those. To get free healthcare, you must have minimum 5 years paid national insurance, no NI, no free treatment. So many other messages coming in here. Natasha, good morning to you. David, they don't need translators. They all get given a phone, and when I have to treat a patient who can't speak English, I get them to translate via the phone. Brilliant. Google Translate.
Brilliant idea, yes.
Colin, Doughty. Me again. Hello, Colin. It was Starmer, who was a young lawyer, defended migrants' rights to get benefits. The floodgates will be open for every Tom, Dick and Harry now. These people who voted Labour should hold their heads in shame. Keep all of those messages coming in. I can sense just how angry people are. Brendan Silver, one of our regulars. Good morning, Brendan. Anyone coming to this country as a migrant should not be allowed to vote until they've lived and worked in this country consistently for at least a decade. I love your shows, Brendan. Thank you very much. And one more. Sean. So, let me get this right. This is Starmer's way of smashing the gangs. I'm bloody furious. Excuse my French. I think that pretty much sums it up.
Sums it up, really, doesn't it? It absolutely does.
I'm furious, actually. Yeah. I am literally furious.
I think that how much more are people going to take from this government before they will insist on a election? Because we're not, as we said, every day there's stories coming out, and every day it's doom and gloom for our wonderful country. I still love our country, you know, and I think, and we should protect it. And when we've got a leader like this who doesn't seem to want to protect it at all, he just seems to want to give it away. And, you know, and back to the comment, you know, the £10, if we have a low-cost charge, something like £10, that's an affordable sum. You know, if they've managed to come across and go back and come across, then they can afford to pay £10 for the cost of the prescription.
Let me just read this one. This is Julie. Good morning to you. Good morning, David. We're watching you on YouTube from Dubai, as we do every weekend.
Oh, hello, Dubai.
Thanks very much. I'm available for a visit. We're trying to decide whether to come back to the UK or stay here. Stay there. As things stand, there is nothing apart from our families to come back from. Starmer is the architect of this immigration catastrophe, going back to 2023 when he fought through the courts to get migrants benefit payments. Keep banging the patriotic drum. We are with you. Julie, thanks ever so much for your message this morning. Excuse me. Let's move on. That was the shortbread. Let's move on to this story in the Telegraph.
Oh, yes.
NHS staff, this is right out of your street. NHS staff have been told, do not call fat people obese. Why? Okay. The National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, or NICE, has banned a series of inoffensive words in the latest version of its inclusive language guide. Remember, it's a taxpayer-funded quango. Apparently, you can't say you're obese. No, you can't. You have to say you are a person with obesity. Also, you can't say you're a diabetic, you're an alcoholic, you're a smoker. You are a person with diabetes. You are a person who is dependent on alcohol. You are a person who smokes. Utter I've never. I mean, honestly.
How much does that cost? How much does that cost to do that study? I mean, it's nonsense, David. Why don't we focus on actually people who are obese and overweight, about helping them manage to get their weight down? How about spending the money that they've spent on this sensitivity guide? Why don't they look at how we manage people with obesity?
But you know this as well as a nutritionist.
Yeah.
Until you can understand that
Yes.
you have a condition which is obesity, you will never deal with it. You're right. You need to turn it on its head. Look, we know that after Christmas you put on weight and so on, you get a bit heavier,
Of
and
course
we all
you do.
know that.
We all know
but
that.
you also know that if you are overweight and significantly and severely overweight, and if you are obese, which is a clinical definition, you are at higher risk of heart disease, ischemic heart disease, diabetes, and all the rest of it.
Exactly. So we know that, and it's been like that for as long as I can remember. So why change it now when we have an increasing amount of adults and children under 5 who are becoming overweight, over 13s becoming obese? That was never the case. So rather than focus on the language, I think we should focus on the actual fact of helping these people who've got the condition.
I rather like this. Lord Young, the founder of the Free Speech Union, said the advice would do a fat lot of help. Can't say that.
Oh, I don't think you should.
Now, I wonder what you think about this. Do you remember back in, I don't know when this was, but back in 2022,
a couple of years ago.
the government, in its infinite wisdom, decided to ban any joy from our lives by sticking calorie labels on everything.
Yes.
And so apparently, so if you go and you think you're eating something healthy, it tells you exactly how many calories, or in my case, if I have a large glass of white wine, yes, please, there are a lot of calories in that.
Yeah.
Apparently, calorie labels on restaurant menus are triggering for people with eating disorders, according to experts from King's College London. The information prompted problematic thoughts for sufferers, whilst others avoided restaurants. This comes after the Cochrane review found the anti-obesity measured didn't work. It only reduced calorie intake by the equivalent of 2 almonds.
Yeah, I never agreed with it. I remember talking about this before on the news and saying this is utterly ridiculous. We don't need to know how many calories are in on our menus. We don't need to know that. When we go out to a restaurant, we're going out to eat. We're going out for the joy and pleasure of eating with friends, eating with family. What does it? We know it's going to be calorific. If you're choosing something that's a massive burger with lots of bacon and double cheeseburger and cheese, well, hey-ho, that's going to have a lot of fat in it. I think we're intelligent enough to know that. And also, I have seen that report, and it was rather disturbing because it is triggering fear and anxiety for people with eating disorders. And that is on the increase as well, David. So, no, I never agreed with it in the first place. And it's no surprise to me that it's reduced the calorie intake by the equivalent of 2 almonds. Hey-ho, that's another brain scheme that's not worked.
No,
why don't we focus on education?
But also...
education.
And I understand that. I think it's quite triggering for people who try and eat a nutritionally balanced diet. But also, there's, I'm a great believer there's no such thing as a bad food, just bad diets. And it's okay to overindulge.
Exactly. I had a very nice chocolate cake yesterday.
Did you?
And people say, "Oh, you're a nutritionist, you don't eat that." Of course I do. But it's all about balance. It's about finding that balance, and I think that's really right. And I think again, money wasted when they should have been looking at education. Bring back education into our schools about nutrition, where the food comes from, how it works, and how, more importantly, it works for their bodies.
And there's another story, actually, which is quite interesting. It's actually about sports nutrition. But there is a bigger issue underneath all of this. It's about ultra-processed foods. Ultra-processed foods are defined as foods that go through multiple processing steps, stripping away the nutrients and so on, adding sweetness and fats and all the rest of it, an artificial thing. It's really difficult to know what is an ultra-processed food. And look, for people like me and lots of very hard-pressed people around the country, time is of the essence. And sometimes, just sometimes, you buy a ready meal.
Yes, that's it. And that, again, I always say there's nothing wrong with that. Everything in balance. People always say, "Oh, you should do this." No, we live very busy, healthy lifestyles. Bad lifestyles sometimes. But we're trying to be healthy. We're trying to do our best. So there's nothing wrong with that. But the majority of your diet, you've got to try and make it fresh. But lots of people have lost the cooking skills, David. That's the issue here, which is why I think it goes back to education. Bring back the education in our schools, teach the young people how to cook, teach the families how to cook. That's what I used to do with Connections in Sure Start. We had all these wonderful centres, and I used to go across the country teaching families in deprived areas how to cook. And not just deprived areas, in very affluent areas. People, you probably know this as a doctor, David, people mistake the fact that they always say, well, it's in deprived areas. Yes, it is, you know, poverty and obviously lack of money, but often obesity is in affluent areas as well, because they've got the money and they can give the expensive snacks. So I think, again, it goes back to education and looking at the label. Ultra-processed foods, look at the label. So it's things...
And what would it say?
Well, it's going to be high in fat, it'd be the red. It's going to be red in fat, sugar and salt. And you want to just try and reduce your intake of those. But then if you look at salami, which is, you know, the Mediterranean diet, that will just be red.
Yeah.
And I eat that.
But it's everything in moderation,
It's everything in moderation, absolutely.
And also, I think it's the relationship with alcohol. The one thing I think the Europeans do are a lot better than us, and certainly Northern European countries like Britain are particularly bad at. We don't do moderation. We either drink or we don't drink. And if we drink, we drink.
That's very true. And again, it is about moderation. Red wine is really good for you, you know, but not if you're glugging, you know, a bottle a day. You know, that's... No, David. No,
no, I wasn't going to. I was actually just thinking, whilst we go to the break, I wondered if someone was kind enough to bring us a couple of glasses of red wine.
Yes, well, this early, why not?
That'd be nice. Calls and red wine after the break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
You've worked inside the business more than I have. How is it possible that so many of these things that Russell Brand did were not even worthy of him being sort of upbraided for, or was called in to see somebody and told, you know, you can't behave like this? You know, why didn't it happen?
None of us are perfect, you know, we have to realise.
Well, I may not be perfect, but I don't expose myself to the staff and I don't have sex in the toilets. You know, does that make me, you know, an extraordinarily, brilliantly talented presenter because I'm the only one that doesn't do it?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, 7:53 Weekend Breakfast with me, David Bull. Monica Price joins me this morning. She's been telling me off in the break about my diet. David, let me start by saying how much I love your weekend shows. Thank you very much. I really don't think my mental health can take much more of this. After hearing the messages from the midwife and the GP receptionist you read out, I cannot believe this country is ever going to sort out the problem of migrants. This country cannot wait for another general election. Reform will not be able to do anything to sort this mess out. If they win, Starmer and co are going to ruin us beyond repair. I fear we are spiralling out of control as a country, and no one can help us. Very sadly, no name on that, but thank you for that. Chris is on the line from Epsom. Good morning, Chris.
Morning, David. Morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to tell you an NHS story, and then I'd like to give a nod to Claire. Right, my NHS story. My girlfriend is a non-EU resident.
Right.
We were caught on late on a Friday. She got an ear infection. And on the Saturday morning, it was quite bad.
Yeah.
And she's a tough cookie. She doesn't complain. So I know when she complains, it's something serious.
Yeah.
So I took her to A&E.
Yeah.
Because of her being a non-EU resident, and we didn't want any trouble with obtaining visas in the future, I asked for the form to fill out so that I would be responsible for paying for the treatment.
Yeah.
Oh, don't worry about that. That's fine. I said, no, I'd like the form. Oh, no, I don't even know where they are. I said, well, find one, because I need to fill that form out. It took them 10 minutes to find the form for me to fill out. They're just not interested in who's entitled to the treatment and who's not. That was ridiculous. I thought it was thoroughly... Even my girlfriend said, what's going on?
I'll tell you what, that wouldn't happen in the States.
No, oh, God, no.
Listen, I was in the Bahamas in '95 with a group of people for the Caribbean Tourist Association meeting, and a good friend of ours had a heart attack. And there was no waiting for an ambulance. We actually threw him in the back of a limousine and took him to the hospital. They wouldn't even look at him on the gurney until they took a swipe of an American Express card for $10,000.
Yeah, 100%.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
I'd like to give a nod to Claire. She's absolutely right. I'm 64, so just
hang on, Claire or Monica?
Sorry,
Monica. We can call her Claire.
You can call me Claire.
Okay, Claire.
Yes,
Monica.
fine.
Sorry, carry on. Time is tight.
Right, Monica. You're absolutely right. I'm 64, just a couple of years older than David.
Rude.
When I went to school, I did horticultural lessons and learnt how to grow things and what the differences were between fruit and vegetables and the rest of it. My brother, he did home economics and home science, which is cooking.
Yes,
bring back home ec. I did, yeah.
Now, I left school, I couldn't cook. I left home at 17. I lived on fried eggs and baked beans, but I learned to cook. I'm now quite a good cook. I buy everything organic, and I mean everything from milk, oil, butter, sugar, all the fruits and vegetables. The most expensive is chicken, but it's still worth buying it. It's completely different in texture and taste. And then what I do is I batch cook.
Yes, absolutely.
And you freeze it, do you?
Yeah, I batch cook because I care for my mum who's bedbound with Parkinson's and dementia.
I'm sorry.
So, and the organic diet makes a hell of a difference to her because it's an autoimmune disease. If you feed her ultra processed foods, her brain power diminishes by at least 75%.
You can see that, can you?
Oh yeah. Unfortunately, my father's passed now. He passed 18 months ago. But before that, when he was still fit and able, they used to go to their caravan for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And he didn't believe in all this sort of organic nonsense, you know. And my family were greengrocers. My grandfather had greengrocery shops in Fulham.
That's what we need
back. Wow, that's right. Bring back the greengrocer.
Now, he didn't understand that all the fruit and vegetables that you see in the supermarket that look beautiful, you know, they're all herbicides, pesticides.
I know, Chris.
Absolutely.
You are right, Chris. Sorry, I've got to jump in just very quickly. I need to go to Jay in... thanks, Chris. Jay in Essex, good morning.
Oh, morning. A couple of things. The fact that people can go abroad for 3 months.
I know.
And get 3 months prescription and take it with them. Are they on benefits and getting the houses paid and everything as well at the same time? It's ridiculous, because I bet they are. I bet they're on benefits. And they shouldn't be allowed to. But what I phoned up for was about the asylum seekers.
Yes.
When they come in, they are interviewed and a report done on by the police. If they're under 16, they go to foster care. If they're 16 and above, they go to supported lodgings providers. And about 7 years ago, I don't know if it is, obviously the price has gone up now. About 7 years ago, they were paying their providers £250 a week, tax-free, from the government to look after them.
Yeah.
They came in straight away. They had dental, doctors and opticians free check.
Yeah.
Enrolled into a school or college. Straight away you had to take them and get them £100 worth of clothes, top to bottom, because they only had what they stood up in. Interpreters and social workers every meeting.
Oh.
Nobody has an idea how much it's actually costing overall, David.
No, brilliant point, Jay. Brilliant point, brilliant point. Let me tell you, I did do some research on this. For migrants, new clothes, just let this sink in, new clothes and shoes is £3,000 every single day. Monica, thank you so much. Our time is upon us. Have you had fun?
Wonderful day. Thank you so much.
No,
Enjoy the rest of the day.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks ever so much. We'll continue after this break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good good morning to you just after 8 o'clock on Sunday, February the 2nd. I'm David Bull, and this is a weekend breakfast. If you are just waking up, I wouldn't bother. I'd go back to bed if I was you. Great news this morning, though, if you are waking up. It's Hedgehog Day today, that's right. A day that raises awareness of these spiky little creatures and their habitat. Now, hedgehogs. I like hedgehogs, actually. They tend to sleep most of the time, which makes them very lucky indeed. Also, here's a fact, don't give them milk because they are lactose intolerant. Was that a hedgehog? Also, today is Yorkshire Pudding Day. Yum! A day that honours the humble yet delicious Yorkshire pudding, a sample of the traditional British roast. Coarse, crispy edges, soft, doughy centre. It really is British comfort food at its best. Yeah. Now, if you're wondering what to do today, I can tell you it's time to play your ukulele, because it is World Play Your Ukulele Day, a day celebrating the stringed instrument, which has 4 strings. It's a member of the guitar family, but the difference is it's really tiny. Here comes the sun, I wish. Right, time for this hour's Fascinating Facts. Today's Fascinating Facts. Now, on this day in 1461, it was the Battle of Mortimer's Cross near Wigmore in Hertfordshire. It was part of the Wars of the Roses, of course, with the Yorkists being the victors. The victory paved the way for Edward's crowning later in the year. On this day in 1940, it was the birth of someone called David John White, OBE, Sir David John White, OBE. He was known rather more familiarly by, if that's the word, his onstage name was David Jason. He's best remembered as the main character, of course, of Derek Del Boy, Trotter in the BBC sitcom Only Fools and Horses. Peckham Springs, that springs to mind. He also played Detective Jack Frost in the ITV crime drama A Touch of Frost. Of course, he was Granville in Open All Hours. He was also Pop Larkin in the comedy drama The Darling Buds of May. And on this day in 1995, the death of Fred Perry, English tennis and table tennis player. He won 3 consecutive Wimbledon championships. Between 1934 and 1936, he was world number 1 4 years in a row. And those are this hour's Fascinating Facts.
Weekend mornings we're taking flight. With David Bull, everything feels right. Weekend breakfast, shining like the sun.
Oh, sorry. You caught me. Good morning, good morning. Weekend breakfast, 5 minutes past 8 on Sunday, February the 2nd. Oh, look at the papers this morning. Let me just show you this. The Sunday Telegraph. So we talk a lot about immigration in this country, the strain it's putting on this country. The fact is you can't see a doctor, you can't get on the housing ladder. We've got masses of people in this country who shouldn't be here. And of course, the government seems to be making it much easier for people to come into this country. But don't worry, Labour has got the entire thing under control, because the Prime Minister, according to the Sunday Telegraph, is going to make it easier for illegal migrants to come to this country. Yes, you heard that correctly. The government is watering down border laws designed to block illegal migrants from obtaining citizenship and to force them into submitting scientific aid checks. Basically, under the illegal migration bill, which was finally passed, if you came here illegally, you could not claim asylum in this country. Now, the Labour government, in its infinite wisdom, is removing that, so that you can actually come and live in this country. Also, they're saying you don't need to be submitted for tests. So what happens is a lot of these young people, youngish men, say they're a child, and there's a reason for that, because they're treated very differently. Now, under the illegal migration bill, you had to then be submitted for things like looking at your teeth, x-rays on your bones and so on, because you can date someone chronologically. You can tell exactly how old or roughly how old they are. So they are revoking legislation to treat asylum seekers who refuse to undergo scientific age checks as adults. Chris Phil, The Shadow Home Secretary said the move is a total capitulation to people smugglers. He says it makes the UK the soft touch of Europe. He goes further. Starmer is a weak Prime Minister. He is weak on borders. He is weak when it comes to protecting our children and our people. Do you agree? Do you agree that the UK is now the soft touch of Europe? 0344 499 1000. The calls are coming in thick and fast, and the messages as well. Also, you can text us, text the word talk and your message to 87222. Oh, and other good news this morning. You'll be thrilled to know, because apparently we didn't have a Brexit vote. This is the Sunday Express front page. Keir Starmer, here's another brilliant idea. He's going to get us back into the EU this morning. Yes, he's cozying up with all the EU leaders. He's meeting all of them. And he is planning to meet all the European leaders. The first time that that's happened since that Brexit vote. Anyway, he essentially really needs to be very careful what he's doing here, because Trump is snapping tariffs, 20% tariffs on Canada, on Mexico, also on China. The UK hasn't been mentioned at the moment. Then Trump said he was going to slap tariffs on the European Union. There are real concerns that if Starmer, who basically is a Europhile, who wants us to take us back into the European Union, decides to get into bed with the European Union, we will have tariffs slapped across the United Kingdom as well. Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative leader, has accused him of trying to reopen divisions from the past. Also, he wants to get involved with the EU with a defence pact, and of course the price of that is going to be our fish. Yet again, it's going to be our fish. And the other part of the deal is the idea that young people from Europe will be able to work here. We heard a brilliant call from Marara saying that the problem is Spain is giving all of these young people amnesty who are under 13. The problem is, of course, if you then allow them into the UK, you're going to get illegal migrants into the UK by the back door. There's another brilliant story as well, the front page of the Sunday Times. You've got a lot of reading to do this morning. Labour despaired over HR boss Starmer. Sir Keir Starmer's chief aide complained he behaved like an HR manager and not a leader. Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, joked he was so inept he couldn't run a bath. That's pretty eviscerating, isn't it? Morgan McSweeney, the Downing Street Chief of Staff and architect of the landslide election victory, compared the leader to human resources worker, which isn't exactly a sort of endorsement, is it? Keep your messages coming in on all of that. Just to remind you, under that illegal migration bill, arrivals on a small boat cannot claim asylum. They're detained for 28 days and they're removed. The crucial part of that was any future asylum claim is invalid and you have a lifetime ban, no right of appeal, no judicial process. And of course, what happens? Keir Starmer, the lawyer who believes in illegal migration, is allowing everyone to come to this country. I mean, I am apoplectic by this, and I'm sure you are this morning as well. Let's move on and talk about politics more generally. Joining me now is Michael Moschbacher, who's Associate Editor at The Telegraph. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'll let my blood pressure settle.
Indeed, exactly. Extraordinary headlines, you're right.
It really is extraordinary. I mean, in this particular section, I like to talk generally about who's had a good week, who's had a bad week, also who should have a week off, who we should keep an eye on. Just from your background, how do you view the state of British politics? We've got a government that is clearly rudderless, tensions between various factions within the party, the rise of Reform UK, now ahead of the Tories in 7 polls. Just your overview of where we are, really, politically.
Yeah, who'd have thought we'd be here last July? Labour wins its landslide win, biggest majority for however long it is, worst Tory results since the party's founded in 1830s, and now we're here. There are obviously signs. The Labour majority was huge in number of seats, but not in percentage of the votes. And now politics is completely fractured. Roughly, the polls are all showing Tories, Labour, Reform pretty much level pegging, all around a quarter of the votes. If you had an election now, you'd clearly have a hung parliament. Just because of how the arithmetic works, it's likely that Labour would still be the largest party, so you'd end up with a Labour, Lib Dem, whatever coalition if the election had been now. But a hopeless state of play. The Tories aren't managing to cut through, Reform's writhing further, and we've got an incredibly unpopular government.
Incredibly unpopular. And you're reading really just, I'm sorry, I'm digressing slightly, but Kemi Badenoch, she was sort of heralded as the new arrival of the Conservative Party. I liked a lot of what she had to say, but she doesn't seem to have any policy. She hasn't delivered, and I know that there is huge infighting in CCHQ over what is going on, and apparently the money has just simply dried up in terms of funding and donations to the Conservative Party.
Yeah, the lack of policy is part of the deliberate strategy, mad as it sounds.
Is it?
Thinking that you've got the Rachel Reeves idea, Kemi Badenoch's idea is you need to have the right mood music, the right sort of sounds, the right sort of I'm on your side, pro-free speech, that sort of thing. And then the policies come later. But it clearly hasn't worked so far. I mean, she's just not cutting through. But I mean, that's, I think, what the idea is. They've sort of looked at historical examples where policies took a while to come out with. But I mean, it's clearly not working. But I mean, that's the idea behind it. And you're right on the funding side of things. Reform seems to be. We haven't had the latest figures through yet, but Reform seems to be doing all the running, and the Tories. It'll get worse and worse for the Tories so long as people don't think they're in the running to be the next government.
It's fascinating. It really is fascinating. I've got friends of mine in the Conservative Party who believe they have a divine right to rule, which clearly isn't right. Let's go back onto track. So who's had a good week this week politically?
I'd argue Rachel Reeves has had a good week. Might sound odd. She's had a dreadful 6 months.
Right.
Tax rises, all of that. Shocking 6 months. Why she's had a good week this week, she said her speech on growth of Heathrow, and that suggests that she's finally accepting that the agenda, the growth agenda, is incompatible with both net zero and the policy she's pushed through. So she's beginning to realise something's got to change. We've got to start grappling the issues. What I've done on national insurance increases, non-dom status, VAT on school fees, all the rest of it isn't going to work. Whether she'll revert, obviously that's not the way she'd put it. She'd claim the two can somehow be made compatible, but it's looking like she's sort of somewhat reconsidering the policies over the last 6 months.
I mean, there's a great story in the Telegraph this morning, which you've probably seen, the budget for growth, which she delivered, this sort of triumphant budget for growth. It was followed by the largest spike in businesses closing down since lockdown. 4,500 companies shut from October to December. That's, I mean, it's shambolic.
She's had, as I was saying, she's had a disastrous 6 months, total shambles. The budget for growth increase employer national insurance contributions, about the worst tax increase you can have for growth, reducing employment, reducing new recruitment, etc. But the only reason she's had a good week is that she seems to, that speech this week and then the Heathrow announcement and the planning announcement seem to suggest that they're beginning to realise this can't go on. Something needs to change. They will actually change it.
I mean, the thing is,
more doubtful.
These are reheated policies, aren't they? I mean, I think the number of times I've been talking about Heathrow and the third runway, and then you've got people like noises off, like Sadiq Khan, who can't keep control of knife crime in the capital, but Sadiq Khan saying he's going to fight his own government.
Exactly. And I mean, these projects all take forever in the UK, don't they? I mean, we've been debating Heathrow expansion for 40 years and it hasn't been happening. So whether she achieves anything it's doubtful, and it won't happen anytime soon. But she seems to. There was also the announcement on the non-dom stuff being watered down slightly. She's only tinkering around the edges. But with sort of more millionaires leaving Britain, 10,000 millionaires leaving Britain last year, and the biggest exodus of millionaires after China in the world. She's beginning to realise that something must be changed. There seems to be some realisation that the current plan isn't working. Whether they'll succeed in changing is much more doubtful. It's likely to be very small tinkering around the edges, but the realisation suggests there's potentially hope if she actually grapples and does those changes.
You know, I think if she was manned up or personed up or womaned up and said, look, the VAT on private schools was a terrible mistake, the employer national insurance contribution is a terrible mistake, and we are actually going to get rid of those, I actually think people would have respect for her.
That's true. But she won't be doing that. It'll be tinkering around the edges. It'll be sort of a reduction there, not a reduction, a sort of an opt-out there, that sort of thing, rather than a wholesale change.
OK, who has had a bad week? And there's a lot to choose from.
Rory Stewart has had a shocking week. His sort of encounter with the American Vice President, J.D. Vance, has certainly knocked a bit of his smugness off. I mean, he's got this, presents himself as this incredibly wise political leader. And then as Vance's response to him was, Rory Stewart's a man who's got an IQ of 110 and thinks he's got an IQ of 130. Somewhat punctured his sort of pretense of omniscience.
It's funny, isn't it? Because it's funny because Rory Stewart was kind of heralded originally as this kind of, as you say, a sage, a wise man who kind of understood where the British public stood and the way that British public thought. But he has become increasingly erratic.
Exactly, precisely. You're correct. It's bizarre to think that so recently he stood for the Tory leadership and wasn't written off at all. I mean, when Liz Truss eventually won, he was one of the candidates for the Tory leadership. I mean, he's been quite a prominent figure, was seen as the hope. His sageness is partly to the way he's been presented, is partly to do with how he's written up his own past and his travels around Iraq and Afghanistan and his sort of colonial role there, quasi-colonial role there, throwback to an earlier age, fits into a certain English stereotype. But clearly, exactly, his sageness is also noticeable with the US election. He sort of pronounced a few days before the election, he'd worked it all out. It was certain there'd be a big Kamala Harris win, and that didn't exactly turn out to be right.
Oops. Now, I mentioned this earlier. Who should we keep an eye on? And you've chosen for your choice something that I also flagged this morning. Tell us more.
Yeah, Friedrich Merz. There's an election coming up in Germany this month, later this month. And Merz is the leader of the Christian Democrats. This was Angela Merkel's old party, the sort of centre-right party. But what's happened is he's basically going against the former leader, going against Merkel, saying mass immigration, her letting in 1 million migrants during the height of the Syrian crisis has been a disaster. Germany needs to get tough on immigration. What's happened there is Germany's got a proportional representation electoral system, and it's difficult for them to win an election outright. And it's particularly difficult because what's happened is the AfD, the Alternative für Deutschland, which is a sort of right-wing populist party, has been rising on an anti-immigration platform. And in Germany, there's this big taboo of the mainstream parties, Conservative, Labour equivalent, CDU, Social Democrats, cooperating with a so-called far-right party. And I mean, the taboo is understandable. It's historical reasons. It's that Hitler only came to power in 1933 with support of the mainstream right, mainstream conservatives. And so there's been a massive taboo of having anything to do with them. And Merz still says, I won't govern with right-wing populists. But this week, he pushed through a vote in the German parliament, the German Bundestag, with the support of AfD MPs. And that on its own, even though it was the Christian Democrat motion, was seen as hugely controversial. But from a British point of view, so the wider watch is... will Germany move on immigration? If Germany starts having much tougher policies on immigration, Britain's very much the odd man out. Germany was the country which was probably the most liberal on immigration, and lots of Europe's problems caused by Angela Merkel's, at the time seen as hugely bold decision. She declared, "Wir schaffen es, we can do it. We can allow all these million immigrants in and it won't impact German society." Well, it's been proven wrong. They can't do it. I mean, there's been all sorts of crime spikes, all sorts of problems in Germany, and it's caused precisely what Merkel was trying to avoid. It's caused a rise of, if you want to call it, far-right party, which is on 25% of the votes. You have various far-left parties in Germany on between 5 and 8% of the votes. So a third of the electorate is voting for parties which are outside the mainstream. And that's partly a result of Merkel's disastrous policy back in 2016.
It really is. I mean, it really is extraordinary. And finally, if I may, who do you think should have a week off?
Tony Blair. He's announced that Tony Blair keeps having an input on politics, and he's come up with a wheeze for how to stop populism growing.
Oh, yeah.
And his wheeze is, we need to introduce ID cards and have more surveillance and use AI for greater surveillance. The logic being this is the way you can crack down on immigration. But if you've already got huge distrust in the political class, huge distrust in government decisions, the answer isn't exactly the same. I'll tell you what we need. We need more surveillance, more ID, more state control. Completely mad idea.
But also, the thing about Tony Blair is the answer is always things like ID cards. It always comes back to ID cards. It doesn't matter what question you ask him. The answer is always ID cards, as far as I can see.
Precisely. Everything can be solved with ID cards. And then, on top of that, the idea of Blair having any solutions to migration when it shot up during his time in power is ludicrous. He's hardly the person to lecture on those issues.
Very good, Michael. Really good to talk to you. Thank you ever so much for your time. That's Michael Moschbacher, who's Associate Editor at The Telegraph. Let's take a couple of quick voice notes now. Graham in Birmingham, good morning.
Good morning, both. We should never forget that Starmer said that Jeremy Corbyn would make a good Prime Minister. They are both of the same mindset. I am absolutely livid.
I think everyone's absolutely livid as well. Graham, thanks very much. Tristan has also sent a voice note. Good morning, Tristan.
I'm absolutely angered, to be honest, what you said. But there will be a reckoning for the next election. But I think there'll be a reckoning before that with the pressure of net zero, what it's doing to our energy security and the situation we could have with blackouts. I think when there's blackouts and there's no power, considering he's literally removing energy sources from us, so he import all energy. If there's blackouts, I think people will go out on the streets. I really do. I think it could be that bad. This government are literally hated, and I'm another one. I hate this government. I really do hate them. I'm disgusted with this government. Absolutely disgusted. Thank God for talkTV. Great show, David.
Thanks very much. I think you echo the sentiments of a lot of this country, actually. Thank you very much for your voice note there. Tristan, time for a break, a cup of tea to regroup. After the break, it's our Future Politics panel. Joining me this morning is Oscar Gill Lewis, who's a writer and political commentator. Joining him is Fariza Balgin-Berveya. I'm going to get that right at some point. She's also here as well to argue the toss on many of today's pressing issues. This is Talk.
this is the police, right? And they've got the blue lights on. They're chasing this woman who's in a wheelchair. Right?
You
can hear the siren, right?
That is brilliant.
Literally, the best thing about it is, right, they cut her up and she goes round them. What's that?
That is brilliant.
They tried to cut her up again, and she goes round on the other side, goes round the back. They stayed in the car. She's doing like 3 miles
probably because the police
an hour.
officers are so fat they probably couldn't run after.
No, it's a shoplifting
She's still at
thing.
it. Look, she's still
She's going. Yeah, I know, amazing. Absolutely
She's
amazing.
reached Leeds, by the way.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. 8:28, Sunday, February the 2nd. I'm just reading some of your fantastic messages. This is Tony in Valencia in Spain. Muy bien. Muchas gracias. Breakfast, plenty of sunshine. Dr. David Bull on TV. Great Sunday, isn't it? That's very sweet. Thank you very much. Can I come and visit? It's probably warmer than here. Thanks very much, Tony, for that. Great show, David. Michelle in Altrincham. Thank you. Spot on. This is Tristan says it as it is. Spot on. My sentiments exactly. Good morning, David. I wish I had a time machine. I would travel forward 100 years to see the mess this country will be in if this keeps going like this. This is very frightening. This is Brian in Worthing. Thank you for that, and good morning to you as well. Ben in Plymouth says, Dr. David, I do hope Trump has an influence on Starmer, but I'm sure Starmer has run to Europe because of Trump. This country was ruined by past governments. It is now being destroyed by Labour. Ian, Starmer clearly has an agenda to assassinate this country on behalf of the EU as a slapdown. It's payback for leaving the EU. As I said, Guy Verhofstadt popped up the other day saying Brexit has failed. What the British people want is to be back in the European Union. No, they don't, Guy. Go away. Good morning. Loads more of these as well. Suzanne in Sunday, Norfolk. Good morning to you. Good morning, Doctor. Giving illegal citizenship is a clear manipulation of voting rights by the Labour government. Hang in there. The Parliamentary Labour Party is about to implode. What do you think? I mean, this great headline, and I will move on because I'm going to get told off in a minute, but just in terms of the big headline, which is in the Sunday Telegraph, the Prime Minister, you'll be delighted to know, is going to make it easier for illegal migrants to come to the United Kingdom. Chris Philps says it is a disgrace. He says we are the soft touch of Europe. Your thoughts, please. 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. But now it's time for the Future Politics panel.
The Future Politics panel.
Well, joining me this morning, I'm delighted to say, Oscar Gill-Lewis, who's a writer and political commentator with Young Voices UK, and Fariza Balgin-Bavea. Yes! I got it right. Good morning.
Almost. Good morning.
Oh, almost. All right. Thanks very much indeed. Oscar, really good to see you. Fariza's been here before. Your first time.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, and it's brilliant to see you as well. Just tell us a little bit for people at home, just so they get to know a little bit about you. What do you do?
Sure. So, like you said, I'm a political commentator, and I'm also a writer with Young Voices UK, and I'm also an editor for Speak Freely magazine.
Fantastic. And just to remind us about Young Voices, what's the aim of that?
Basically, it's to give young writers who, in the broad sense of conservatism or libertarian, who support a free society, and give them a chance to write and get in the media and put their voice out there, basically.
Fantastic. And how have you been, Fariza?
Very well, thank you so much. How are you?
Yeah, good. Right, let's start, if I may, with you, Fariza. I have never seen so many messages coming in this morning, and this is the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. Immigration. You and I have spoken about immigration. This channel spends its entire time talking about immigration. The whole point of Brexit was to take back control of our money, laws and borders and so on. Now, so this is the big story this morning. Labour is watering down border laws designed to block illegal migrants from obtaining citizenship and to force, and the idea that basically, and this is about removing the scientific age checks as well, they are repealing rules introduced by the Tories that meant that small boat arrivals could almost almost never become UK citizens. It's also revoking legislation which gave ministers the power to treat asylum seekers who refuse to undergo the age checks as adults too. So it is, as Chris Phillips says, and rightly so, it is a total capitulation to people smugglers. Where do you stand on this?
I think that we should give the Labour government the chance to show what they want to do with this new policy, because obviously the Tory government and their policies on immigration didn't really work so well. So I think that we are very quick to judge what they want. But for example, we also have Labour MPs saying Labour would continue to use age assessment and won't hesitate to go further in legislation if needed. And I think what they're just aiming to do is actually increase efficiency when it comes to processing asylum seekers and everything. Definitely immigration is a big problem. I don't think anyone's denying that. I just think that there are different ways that we can tackle it, and I think we should give them a chance to see how it works.
Right, but you would have thought, OK, I get all of that, but the first policy they did was remove Rwanda, which was the only deterrent that actually we had, and those planes were due to take off, and I think that's what the British public wanted. There hasn't seemed to be any concerted policy from Labour, and judging by the depth of opinion and strength of opinion this morning, people are furious.
Understandably furious, but I think with Rwanda there is a lot of human rights violations.
No, but furious about this.
Oh yeah, 100%, but that's what I mean. They removed the Rwanda scheme because of human rights violations, potentially. And it's just a lot of things that we need to kind of keep in mind when it comes to immigration. I understand why people are furious. The immigration system, and well, actually the lack of the immigration system in this country led to a lot of problems in today's society. We definitely need to work on it, I think, but it's just like we have to wait and see. It can never be said or fixed in like 1 minute or 1 hour. Like, we really need to wait and see what they say.
OK, so you're giving them the benefit of the doubt. Oscar, where do you stand on this? I mean, it seems to me the Labour government is totally out of touch with the way that the British public are feeling. I can see that from the strength of feeling this morning. Your thoughts?
Well, I actually think that reducing the limits on immigration is actually a great opportunity for the United Kingdom. It's a chance for workers to come into the UK.
But they're not workers, they're young men. They're economic migrants and they shouldn't be here.
Yes, but one thing that that the United Kingdom could institute is that they have to work first for 3 years or however long, and then claim benefits. So they'd have to work first before claiming benefits.
But what about the idea that all this does, and Chris Phillips says that it makes us the soft touch of Europe, that countries across Europe are struggling with the influx of migrants that are going into their countries. And surely if we make things easier, more and more will come to this country. We don't have enough doctors' surgery, so we don't have enough resources to actually service the number of people who are coming here. These are young men. They are saying they're kids because they know they're going to be treated differently. It's unacceptable when we've got people in our own country, like people who've served in the forces, who can't actually get a roof over their heads. It's unacceptable.
Well, Chris Phillips can say what he likes, but really, I think this is a great opportunity, and in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, I think the economic benefits of this would be undeniable. But really, this is the push that we need to start deregulating industry, deregulating housing and land regulation, and allow people to build things. When you have more supply, that you get more doctor surgeries, you get more businesses, you get more opportunities.
But they're not bringing money into this country. We are then supporting illegal migrants in this country. That doesn't make sense.
But there are lots of examples in history in the United States where lots of poor people went across and they made their living.
But there are safe and legal routes to come in legally.
Absolutely, which is why we need to legalise these routes. Actually, by legalising the paths to come to this country, it hurts the smugglers.
Right. I'm amazed that both of you are of the same view, but I'm absolutely gobsmacked this morning. Just let me tell you, in terms of the bill, we've got all of these migrants in hotels that is being underwritten by the Home Office. We are also giving new clothes, shoes to these people who are coming here that have chosen to come here, £3,000 a day. We spent £4 million over 3 years just on clothes and shoes. We have a storehouse as big as Matalan with changes in them. We're giving mobile phones to people. We're just bonkers, aren't we? Come on, unless I'm just draconianly right-wing.
We come across like that, but to be honest, I also think that the Labour government, they have a really bad rep right now. But they don't really talk about the good
This is
things
their
that they
honeymoon
do.
period, by the way. This is the best it gets.
It's over.
Right.
The honeymoon period is over. But I just think that they don't really talk about the good things that they've done towards immigration.
What have they done?
On his reset speech a couple of months back, he said that they processed 1,000 more asylum seekers cases than the Tory government ever did. Deportation numbers are up at 29% than the last 6 years. So I think that's a good indication that they know what they're doing, potentially. So I say potentially because they promise one thing and then they break their promises over and over again. And that's just a whole different story. But with this new scheme that they want, I think they actually just want to focus on efficiency and actually lowering the resources that is spent on immigration.
It's fascinating that you both think this. I just wonder, and I just want to broaden this out slightly, if I may, from illegal migration, and I can see that both of you do not agree with the majority of our audience this morning, who believe that people should be sent back and literally put the Royal Navy in the Channel and send them all back to the countries that they came from. That is what people want. I can tell you that. That is what the vast majority of this country wants. They want to take back control.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things is that for the past 13 years, the Tories have shown us that they're just incapable of doing it.
You're absolutely right.
I mean, Priti Patel, Suella Braverman can speak tough all they like, but they would just prove to the country that they were incapable of doing anything. I don't think the Labour government will be any better at making a change, which is why we need to legalise these routes and actually focus on stopping the criminals. We need to... The more the government tries to do, the less effective it will be. It needs to focus on this very small things that it actually can do properly, and I'm not sure the Labour government can do anything properly.
Are you not worried that if you say, hang on a minute, I've just got to get this right in my head. If you're saying, so we've got economic migrants, young men who are coming here, who chuck their passports in the sea, who are then given a mobile phone, given food, given housing, all the stuff that actually people in this country don't have, doesn't that just send the signal that more people should come?
Sure, but I don't think we should be giving them food or phones or anything.
So you would what would you do though, practically? What would you do? So you've got people coming off a boat, what would you do? You're now the Home Office Minister. What would you do with them?
Well, by legalising these routes,
there are safe and legal routes to come into the country.
Sure, but by further reducing...
So you would expand those routes?
Yes, I would. It would.
Okay.
And this stops the incentive to chuck your passport in the sea.
OK, so there's a certain rationale to that, which is actually if you allow that and you allow them to work, then they have revenue and then they can pay tax on that revenue.
Exactly.
Fariza, I saw you disagreeing.
I disagree here because I definitely don't think that this should be legalised, because these are people that put their kids at risk, their lives at risk, and everyone at risk, and even this country.
And there are true migrants. There are true migrants, and they need 100%. To be looked after.
Whenever I look at migration, I always think, okay, every single person has a story. Not one person is the same. So therefore, like Trump's policies, zero tolerance, that doesn't seem to be working all that well when it comes to the divide in society.
He managed to fly people out of the United States.
He managed that, but look at what's happening in society. Everyone's disagreeing with each other. The us versus them mentality is through the roof right now in the United States. And I know people may agree, you know what, at least he does what he said he's going to do. And I see the point in that. But definitely legalizing immigration is not the way to go in this country. It's, we're record levels of immigration. That's never good when it comes to safety, extremism, and all of that. I just think that there are loopholes that people go around.
That's a really interesting point. We're basically importing alien culture into this country that don't subscribe to our values.
Not necessarily.
And that's the problem.
Not necessarily. I don't think every person is against the British values. You get extremists, but they're the negative correlation. They stand out because they do a lot of the things that we don't agree with. Therefore, they stand out, creating a bad rep for everyone else.
OK, I'm going to let you pause there, regroup. You're doing a fantastic job, Oscar and Fariza. Just very quickly, David, this is Barry. Could the programme please have a health warning at the start? My blood pressure is going through the roof. We'll continue with Future Politics after this break. Here's an antihypertensive.
the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. We're in the middle of Future Politics panel with Oscar Gill-Lewis, who's a writer and political commentator, and Frieza Balgin-Gouveia. Almost. Good morning.
Good morning.
Right, let's move on to this, which is really fascinating. I was sent this by Wolves of Westminster, and thank you for that. The British Polling Council has recently drawn a direct comparison between Reform UK and the National Rally in France. They have essentially declared Reform UK as being far right. This distinction has been drawn by Delta Poll. It was made at an event on the 15th of January. They hosted all sorts of other pollsters there as well. The British Polling Council represents 33 major polling organisations in the UK. The segment in question was called The Rise of the Far Right. So Delta Poll, Ipsos, YouGov, Opinion, Survation, Sky Data, all there and so on. So essentially they said, right, we need to look at what Reform UK is doing and compare it to the National Front, and that is because Reform UK is a far-right party. What is a far-right party, and is Reform UK far-right?
It's not really clear what far-right means. I think it's just a name that people use when they don't like something, that, you know, Reform are a bit cheeky and they say, oh, that's far-right, and it's just a way for people to ignore them. It's not clear what...
I think far-right politics is normally called extremism, xenophobia, homophobia, all those kind of things. Those are far-right policies. Do you think that encompasses Reform UK?
I don't think it does. I think far-right would be something more like the BNP, and, you know, thank God that that party is gone. But Reform is just... Reform is more of a Thatcherite, centre-right party from my perspective. It's not really clear that they're far-right in any of their policies.
That's interesting. Frieza?
I don't agree. I don't think Reform UK is far right. I think they're very right wing, and
are
you
they?
know,
why do you say that?
wing.
No, I want you to tell me why are they far right?
They're not far right.
Oh, they're not.
No, they're
Okay.
just very right wing. But
Right. Why are they very right wing?
Because I think they're more right wing than the Tory government. Because
Give me an example.
Well, just anything really. I mean, they just love this country. They're very nationalistic, very patriotic.
Okay, yeah, that's good. I agree with that.
And I think they're very traditional. When it comes to like the 21st century, and especially now, this day and age, when you talk about traditional values and such, it may come across as very, very far right wing for like very far left people.
Why is it far right to believe in family and the country? Is it?
It's not that. I just think that that's the main difference right now. You either are on one spectrum of politics or on the other.
No, I understand.
What about all the people in the middle? I think that they find themselves just lost right now.
So Oscar said something very interesting, that Reform is occupying the Thatcherite territory. I agree with you, actually. Yeah. I think it's absolutely on the money. These are fiscally conservative. They're also socially conservative, but actually and the thing that really annoys me is when people level accusations of xenophobia or racism or homophobia at Reform UK. All of that is utter nonsense, because Reform UK has candidates of all sorts of nationalities, different colours, also different sexualities, and that none of that matters. What matters is actually being passionate about this country and delivering for the country.
Absolutely. It's just not useful to the conversation, just calling people far right or xenophobic or racist. It's just name calling. It's not constructive criticism of their policies, why their policies are wrong, or why they're incorrect, or how we could do better. One thing I would disagree with is saying that they're far right in comparison to the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party doesn't have an ideology. It's definitely not centre right. It's a wet towel as far as I can see.
It's a brilliant point. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, Reform has overtook Tories by membership numbers, and I think that shows a lot. But also, just adding on to that point where people think that, you know, Reform is far right, I think it's a lot to do with media and media influence and the fear of the unknown. Whether you like it or not, a new party is always going to cause some anxiety into people, because they don't necessarily know, you know, what are the policies. They don't really have the history of what was happening throughout the years. So I think people, because they're anxious and they're kind of like scared for the future and what this party represents, they tend to put a label on something so that it can make it easier to understand for themselves.
Okay, I mean, obviously I have a vested interest and I've been there right from the very beginning. Let me just show you the poll, if we've got the poll of the latest voting intentions This week, every single poll, this is 7 out of them, has shown Reform pulling ahead. This poll is Find Out Now. Reform UK on 27, Labour on 23. Conservatives, and many of my friends believe the Conservatives have a natural divine right to rule. We're clearly not doing very well. Kemi Badenoch has no policies whatsoever. Reform UK really in its ascendancy. If I was to say to Richard Tice and Nigel Farage, as we did at the time some years ago when we were polling at 2 or 3% that we'd be on 27%, no one would have believed it. What do you think is going on, Oscar? I'll tell you one other thing that I just want to get from you. The number of young people joining Reform is off the scale.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that they're trying to offer an alternative to the Conservative Party, and especially being that they're really the only two...
Is it to the Conservative Party, though? Because actually there are more ex-Labour members joining currently than Tories.
That's interesting. I'd not consider that, but just in terms of an actual party rather than the members, I'm not sure why Labour members would join Reform. I'm not sure what Reform really offers those members unless they're so disenfranchised by Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves.
I mean, if you are tribally left and you have worked very hard and you maybe own your own property, you've got kids and you're finding the economy struggling, wouldn't you welcome lower tax to actually have respect back in this country, to stop illegal migration, all the stuff that Reform stands for?
So you're probably right there, that the people from the left joining Reform are probably older people with kids who are married, who have a house, who are fed up with establishment politics like Labour, like the Conservative Party. And then the younger people joining Reform are probably more conservative, more right-wing, and who would rather see the end of the Conservative Party.
Interesting. We'll continue this after the break. Stay where you are. This is Weekend Breakfast. A lot of these kids are saying, well, I'm anxious, I can't go to work, I've got disabilities, I need to be on benefits.
Yeah, and why not? I mean, if they are suffering with a condition that is medical, which is recognised as anxiety and depression are, then they should receive treatment for that and support for that. If part of that process of getting better means that they're sick and they cannot work for the time being, then that's just part of life's cost.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 8:54. Good morning to Maya, by the way, who's Fariza's mother, who I know is watching. And also Emily Patient, good morning to you as well, who is a friend of Oscar's. So good morning to you. We're in the middle of Future Politics panel with Oscar and Fariza. I want to ask you about Tony Blair. Just when you think you can't get rid of him, up he pops. He's back. He's back. There he was, lounging around, little photo shoot, Sunday Times, I think it is. Tony Blair, you're too young to know this, but he famously promised to be tough on crime and tough on the causes of crime. Now, he is worried about the rise of the far right, allegedly, and he says the answer to all of this, and we were talking about this earlier in our political section with Michael and Mosbacher, about Tony Blair's answer to pretty much everything in life, apparently, is to cut down on nasty right-wingers who are very upset about the direction of the country and to bring in ID cards.
Yeah.
You want ID cards?
I think so. I think it would be a great way, because when you get like global tech examples, for example, like Singapore, United Arab Emirates, they all use digital ID pass and facial recognition, and they're one of the safest places in the world right now.
They also chop your arm off if you steal anything.
Yeah, well, because they can track all the criminal records and everything. And I think that it's just a good way to adapt into the 21st century, using the technology that's available to us all, to actually try and adapt it to policies and just politics in general, and try to just become a better state when it comes to...
Would it stop illegal migration?
Potentially, maybe. If
Potentially,
that would mean,
maybe isn't a very strong argument for the introduction of facial ID recognition technology.
If it would mean that they can track movement and kind of like what's everyone doing, and if they're committing any crimes, then I think that can definitely reduce the people that wanted to come here illegally.
ID cards?
I think that's absolutely insane.
Do you?
I think someone needs to tell Tony Blair what civil liberties are. I mean, if we're going to talk about Singapore, and you mentioned somewhere else that
no crime,
or Dubai, there's no crime. They're perfectly safe. I mean, one of the ways that you can just stop all crime is you can lock up men between 18 and 36 years old, lock them up until they're about 28, and no crime, basically. Do we really want to live in a society like that? I mean, that is absolutely insane. I mean, El Salvador has massively reduced its crime rate because they basically locked everybody up. I mean, Fariza, I noticed you have a tattoo. If you go to El Salvador, you'd probably be arrested. Their standard for arresting people to stop the crime, to stop the gangs, is if you have a tattoo. And they built these huge mega prisons that hold 40,000 people. And if you have a tattoo, they're locking up 12, 14-year-olds. Is this a society we want to live in?
I didn't necessarily give you those examples, but I just think when it comes to like whenever people go, especially women actually,
Answer
when they
his
go
question.
Could you repeat your question?
No, his question is, do we really want to be a society that essentially, and the chill down my spine is papers, please. You're stopped, and that's what happens in Spain. You're stopped by the police. Where are your papers? You want that?
Maybe. I think that it might lead to a lot of solving of our crimes, and a lot of potentially just even discouraging a lot of illegal migrants to coming here, committing crimes, when they realize that, you know, when you do what you do, there are consequences for your actions.
Throw something naughty at you. Imagine you're having a romantic tryst that you don't want anyone to find out about, and you have to carry ID. Do you want that? State surveillance on everything you do?
Maybe. I don't necessarily disagree with it. I think there are definitely conversations to be had about how this is going to be implemented and what are the drawbacks and the positives of this, but I just think we don't need to discourage it right now.
Isn't the concern here the extension of this? I can see where he's coming from, and whilst superficially it might be okay, I'm just deeply nervous about the state having any information, and I think it's also worth remembering they've already tried this. Don't forget the COVID passport was digital ID, and it was brought in through the back door by the government, who made people think it was for their own benefit. It wasn't.
You're absolutely right. I mean, when did we forget the United Kingdom was a free society, that you just have to show papers just because somebody in a uniform said so? It's absolutely ridiculous. And one thing I would point out is that this policy is not to stop illegal migrants or to deter them. It's to stop populists.
Correct.
Really? I mean, like...
I thought at one point he actually liked populists, the ones that voted for him.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you ever so much to both of you, to Oscar Gill-Lewis and also to Fariza Balgin-Bavea. Thank you very much indeed. That was today's Future Politics panel.
The Future Politics panel.
Ooh, lots of you getting in touch. This is interesting. Jill in Hertfordshire. Every asylum seeker should be told you will never be able to go home for a holiday if you come into the UK. That will solve a huge problem. David, this is Louise. Good morning. The Labour Party are not for the workers anymore. They are for the socialist, globalist elites. They only got union support because they got a deal. Also, if putting your country and its citizens first, then yes, reform is far right. Thank heaven for reform. That is John. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. After the break, it's our Sunday surgery. I'm really keen to talk about this. I want to talk about sickle cell disease, a horrible disease which I've treated a lot. Dr. Sarah Trompeter, who's a haematologist and sickle cell specialist at NHS Blood and Transplant, will join us to talk about this amazing gene therapy. It's extraordinary. This is Weekend Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to you just after 9 o'clock on Sunday, February the 2nd. If you've just joined us, where have you been? 3 hours has flown by. We're in the final stage, the 4th hour of Weekend Breakfast. Good news for you this morning if you have just woken up, though. It's Hedgehog Day today. Hedge pigs. A day that raises awareness of these spiky little creatures and their habitat. The nice thing about hedgehogs, and lucky them, they can sleep the whole time. They sleep a lot. Also, don't ever give them milk because they are lactose intolerant. That's apparently apparently a hedgehog. It's Yorkshire Pudding Day today as well, a day that honours the humble yet delicious Yorkshire pudding. Yummy. A staple of the traditional British roast. Crispy edges, soft owy centre. It's British comfort food at its very best. Really. Thanks. I'm really hungry, actually. It's Play Your Ukulele Day today as well, so get your ukulele out. It's a day celebrating the four-stringed instrument. It's actually a member of the guitar family, but it's only very tiny. Beautifully done. You've been practicing. Let's move on to today's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
So today's fascinating facts, on this day in 1650 was the birth of Nell Gwyn. Of course, her real name, Eleanor Gwyn. She was a former orange seller at Drury Lane Theatre. She became a comedy actress and later mistress of Charles II, by whom she had 2 sons. On this day in 1901, it was the state funeral of Queen Victoria. Now, at the time of her death, she was actually reigned for an amazing number of years, actually 63 years and 216 days. It was longer than any other British monarch and the longest of any female monarch in history. That is, apart from Queen Elizabeth II. She overtook Queen Victoria on the 9th of September 2015 as the longest-serving monarch of the United Kingdom of Canada, Australia and New Zealand. Also, sticking with the Queen, the late Queen, she opened the National Exhibition Centre, a venue I've been to many, many times near Birmingham. It is the largest and busiest exhibition centre in the United Kingdom. It is absolutely vast, and it is the 7th largest in Europe. And those are today's fascinating facts.
Weekend breakfast, feel alive and right. With David Bull, everything's just right.
Good morning, good morning. 5 minutes past 9, Sunday, February the 2nd. Right, if you are still in bed and you haven't seen the papers yet this morning, I don't know whether you should. Really good news, actually. If we didn't have enough illegal migrants in this country, Keir Starmer's going to make it easier. Yeah. Front page of the Daily Telegraph this morning. The Prime Minister eases rules for illegal migrants. You've gone absolutely bonkers about this this morning, and I don't blame you. The government is watering down border laws designed to block illegal migrants. They actually want to, well, I'm reading into this, but it seems they want to make it easier for illegal migrants to come here. They're repealing rules which were introduced by the Tories, which meant that small boat arrivals could almost never become UK citizens. If you remember, this was the illegal migration bill. It passed in July. This is what that bill said. Arrivals on small boats cannot claim asylum. They will be detained for 28 days and they will be removed. And furthermore, any future asylum claim is invalid with a lifetime ban. There is no right of appeal and no judicial process. Now, Labour doesn't think that's good enough, so they're going to get rid of all of that. So this is part of the new Border Security, Asylum and Immigration Bill. They say they will help tackle the small boats crisis. One of the other pressing problems, and I've heard this firsthand, a lot of these young men who are coming here illegally as economic migrants arrive on British shores having chucked their passport in the sea, and then they say they're a child. Now, under that bill, the illegal migration bill, they would have been subject to investigations, and I think that's only right and proper, like an x-ray of their bones or looking at their molar teeth or an MRI or whatever it is. But you have to ascertain, are they a kid? Because if they are treated very differently to if you are treated as an adult. Now, they want to get rid of all of that as well. Chris Philp says this is total capitulation to people smugglers, and it will make the UK the soft touch of Europe. What do you say? Do you agree with that? Does it make us the soft touch of Europe? Are we already the soft touch of Europe? You've seen what Meloni is doing in Italy, for example. The number 0344 499 1000, calls charged at the national rate. If that wasn't bad enough, Keir Starmer is cozying up to the EU. Yes, here we are, front page of the Express. Keir Starmer edging us back into the EU. Has he not looked at what Donald Trump is doing, imposing tariffs on Canada, on Mexico, on China, and on the EU? That's coming down the line, and now he's decided that actually the future of the United Kingdom is back with the European Union. Look, I spent a lot of time getting out of the European Union. The last thing I want is to go back in there, thanks very much. This is rather good, though. Sunday Times this morning. Labour despaired over HR boss Starmer. This is a new book. So Keir Starmer's chief aide, this is Morgan Sweeney, architect of Labour's landslide election victory, privately compared Keir Starmer to a human resources worker. Dear. He says he's an HR manager, not a leader. The Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, joked that Keir Starmer is so inept he could not actually run a bath. Make of that what you will. Now, though, it's time for Sunday Surgery.
Dr. David Bull's Sunday Surgery.
This is a really important story, actually. I've treated loads of people with this condition, which is sickle cell disease. It's a horrible disease, as I'll get Sarah to explain in just a minute. The headline, though, this week, and you may have seen this, revolutionary gene editing therapy for sickle cell offers a hope of a cure. This is NHS patients with sickle cell disease will be able to benefit from a groundbreaking gene editing treatment that offers the prospect of a cure. It's really clever. It was approved for use on the NHS on Friday by the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence for older children and adults with a severe form of sickle cell disease. I think it's pretty groundbreaking. But to understand why it's so important, I think it's wise to understand what sickle cell disease is, how it affects people, and quite frankly, how debilitating it is. And people with sickle cell, and I'll let Sarah explain all of this, come to hospital with repeated crises. It's an appalling condition and it's very difficult to manage sometimes. Well, joining me now is Dr. Sarah Tropiter, who's a haematologist and sickle cell specialist at NHS Blood and Transplant. Good morning to you.
Good morning, thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure, thanks ever so much for coming on. Do you want to just explain to people about sickle cell, about haemoglobin, what happens and why, and the symptoms that follow as a result?
So sickle cell disorder is an inherited disorder. So children will get it from a gene from their mother and their father. The gene itself causes a change in the hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the oxygen-carrying molecule in red blood cells. And it makes the cells sticky, changes their shape, and then that causes organ damage on a day-to-day basis, but also, as you described, there will be pockets of time where it gets much more severe, and we call those crises. And these crises can be painful. They're not always painful, and when they are painful, they can be excruciatingly painful. Many of the women that I look after describe it as much worse than childbirth, which just makes my blood run cold. But some of the crises are not necessarily painful and can be accompanied by very severe organ damage, perhaps in the chest, strokes, kidneys, liver. Any organ, in fact, can be damaged because any organ has a blood supply. And I think what's really interesting about the news on Friday is that this is in the setting of very little treatment options for patients.
So can I just go back? Can I just go back so people understand? With the haemoglobin, which is this kind of, they're kind of squishy, aren't they? And they can be squished into very small capillaries. And when with sickle cell, the reason it's called sickle cell is because they turn into sickles and they get stuck.
Yeah, it's a combination of getting stuck, but also in that process of changing shape, they become very sticky and they make all the other blood cells sticky and the lining of the blood vessels. So you get this inflammatory process, which is damaging to the blood vessel walls and then causes damage in that organ where the blood vessels are, wherever that might be happening.
And just in terms of that, how do people tend to present? You mentioned that you get damage to various organs. I've certainly seen people who've come in with visual loss, who've had strokes, for example. Men have a particular condition or can have a particular condition called a priapism. What's the majority of presentation?
Well, nowadays we have the antenatal newborn screening programme. So we tend to see children in our clinics from very early on. So people should know that they've got a diagnosis, and we work with families to introduce them to medications such as hydroxyurea and good care and good sort of healthcare advice generally, penicillin, folic acid, to prevent crises. Now, hydroxyurea is not a cure-all. It's certainly an excellent medicine, but not everyone engages with that. And certainly we see the majority of our patients who repeatedly attend are people who have trouble engaging with treatment. But it's not good enough for everyone, and a lot of people are dependent on blood transfusions, often lifelong, to prevent some of the more serious complications.
Sorry, and I cut you off. So in terms of this new revolutionary therapy, just describe to us what it is.
It's essentially a bone marrow transplant that uses your own cells that have been adapted in the laboratory to produce more fetal hemoglobin. Fetal hemoglobin, as it sounds, is the hemoglobin we all had when we were fetuses, when we were in our mother's tummies. And fetal hemoglobin is important in that it would dilute out the amount of sickle hemoglobin you had in a red blood cell, but also interact and stop the sickle hemoglobin forming a structure that makes the cell sickle. So it's sort of two effects it has. Hydroxyurea actually does that as well, but it's not enough for everyone. And although bone marrow transplant was funded in the same way as this funding came through on Friday, a year or so ago for sickle for adults as well as children, it's not everyone has a sibling that they can have a bone marrow transplant for. So this is an important option for people who are both sick enough and well enough. You want to hit that sweet spot.
And just in terms of this, this is gene editing, isn't it, using CRISPR-Cas9, which is basically a pair of scissors, to put it bluntly.
Yeah, so you take your bone marrow out of your patient and you take it to the laboratory, and then the company that's providing this service then introduces genes to make sure that you can make fetal hemoglobin. That's prepared in the laboratory, and then meanwhile you undergo a transplant procedure, which is whereby your bone marrow is wiped out using chemotherapy. And then this is then infused in a drip, like a normal drip well, it won't be your arm, but in a normal drip. And it makes its way to your now empty bone marrow, and then sort of seeds there and starts to make cells over the forthcoming month or so. And those cells should make a lot of fetal hemoglobin, which then would ameliorate your sickle cell disorder.
And how often do you have to have this, or is it a one-off?
It's a one-off treatment, but there is a question around how long it lasts, and gene therapy is not new. Gene editing is not that new. It's been used in other disorders. And so there will be a degree of your own cells coming back over time, but it could give you 10, 20 or so years of disease-free life, which I think a lot of people could do with.
Oh, 100% actually. And just going back to that, I remember meeting Emmanuel Charpentier, who is one of those people who developed CRISPR-Cas9, which is quite extraordinary. So just in terms of this, I imagine it's not cheap.
No, it isn't cheap. And actually, there was a whole stage of negotiations, as there always are with expensive treatment, not specific to sickle. So you get it licensed by the MHRA first, and then there is a process of NICE doing a health economics evaluation and a negotiation with the manufacturers to decide on a price, which isn't explicit to us. And then they make their announcement, as they did on Friday, about that it's available. So you have a process where first you could prescribe it, but no one's paying for it. And then you have the next step, which is you can prescribe it and the NHS will pay for it.
So as a haematologist, how do you view the use of this on the NHS? I mean, is it, I hate to use that word, but is it game-changing in some respects?
On an individual case basis for individual patients who will be eligible and interested in having this treatment, it will be game-changing for them. I think there is an awful lot more to do to understand this disorder. There are very few other treatment options, and we need other innovations to improve care and treatment options for the patient cohort. And I think that's really, really important to remember. This is a very significant procedure. Not all patients are going to be well enough for it. There's a degree of infertility that is almost inevitable, and not everyone's going to want to do that. You'll need to take time off work. Parents will need to take time off work to be with their families, and there are side effects. So this is not a walk in the park. But for some people, their disease is really, really debilitating, life-threatening, and highly unpleasant. And I can understand why some people would want to take that option. Yes.
Sarah, thank you so much for your time. You've explained that beautifully. That's Dr. Sarah Trumpeter, who's a haematologist and sickle cell specialist at NHS Blood and Transplant. And that was today's Sunday Surgery.
Dr. David Bull's Sunday Surgery.
Ooh, so busy this morning. I'm asking about Keir Starmer and these amazing front page, I mean, absolutely gobsmacking front pages. This one in the Telegraph, he's going to make it easier for illegal migrants to come here. By the way, if things aren't bad enough, he's going to cosy up to the EU, because that's exactly what we didn't vote for. He's not a manager, he's an HR technocrat. I think anyone could have told you that. Let me know your thoughts on that, please. Also, Chris Philp is saying we are the soft touch of Europe, that Keir Starmer has made us the soft touch of Europe in terms of immigration. Do you agree? Or would you level at Chris Philp? Hang on a minute, you were in power. You got us in this state in the first place. 0344 499 1000, calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. After the break, I'm going to be taking some of your calls. I can see how livid many of you are, and I can see how many calls are coming in. Also, because it's Sunday, we're going to be discussing the weird news that has made the headlines this week from around the world. This is Weekend Breakfast.
This is the police, right? And they've got the blue lights on. They're chasing this woman who's in a wheelchair. Right?
It's 2 miles an hour.
You can hear the siren, right?
That is brilliant.
Literally, the best thing about it is, right, they cut her up and she goes round them. What's that?
That is brilliant.
They tried to cut her up again, and she goes round on the other side, goes round the back. They stayed in the car. She's doing like 3 miles an hour.
Probably because the police officers are so fat they probably couldn't run after.
No, it's a shoplifting
She's still at
thing.
it. Look, she's still
going. Yeah, I know, amazing. Absolutely
She's
amazing.
reached Leeds, by the way.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 9:23 on Sunday, February the 2nd. So many of you getting in touch. Let's take some calls. Jim is in Worcestershire. Good morning, Jim.
David, good morning to you. Great that so many people are alive and well this time of the morning to talk to you. And what a great variety of subjects you've got.
Oh, thank you very much.
But it's a great programme, thank you. Yeah, I was in hospital, on one of my visits to hospital, and a young doctor, probably a junior doctor actually,
Probably.
he said to one of his colleagues, he said, he's obese, pointing at me. And
he's a what? Obese?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He said, and I took exception to it. It sounded like I had a serious illness. And the illness I had was, I was a fat arse who drank too much alcohol, ate too much food. Hello?
Yeah, no, I'm listening.
And all I had to do was stop drinking and stop eating, and I lost weight.
So, can I just ask you this? So, under this new guidance, which obviously which this body clearly hasn't got anything else to do, they say you can't say someone's obese. No, you can't do that because it's pejorative.
It doesn't bother me at
So
all.
you're a person with obesity. But surely also, you hearing that, was that the trigger that meant you, when you said, oh, hang on a minute, I am a fat arse?
Yes, of course it was. It injected a thought in me that I had to do something about it, really. And so I did.
Well, well
I'm
done.
not obese now. I'm a few pounds overweight, but I mean, you know, that's okay. I can cope with that. All I have to do is stop drinking again.
Yeah, absolutely. And can I just ask you about this other story this morning about calories? How do you feel if you go out for a meal, and let's face it, not many of us are doing that at the moment, it's so expensive, but if you go and to a pub or to a restaurant or whatever, and there are calories on that menu, is that a good idea or a bad idea?
Well, for those who are calorie counters, it's probably a good idea, but I don't calorie count. I mean, as I'm getting a bit older, I don't eat as much as I used to eat years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, if we had spaghetti bolognese on a Friday night and 2 bottles of Barolo wine, I would end up eating my partner's spaghetti bolognese.
Well, it's because you had all the wine. Sounds marvellous. I'll be round. I'll be round, Jim. Thanks ever so much for your call this morning. Loads of messages coming in, as you can imagine, this morning. For 50 years, this is Bernie. We've been known as the dustbin of Europe. Now with David, we are the dustbin of the world. David, says Louise, imagine what the NHS could do with these and other therapies if we got rid of all the money they are wasting. Mike, you're talking about Starmer here, Mike in Colchester. David, this is the same playbook that the Democrats tried in the US that led to Trump's victory. Starmer is making it easier for illegals to become UK citizens because he wants them to have voting rights, as they will be likely to vote Labour. The threat of reform could well be accelerating this process. Remember when Starmer stood on the steps of Number 10 and said country before party? It is a total betrayal. Great show, thank you. And thank goodness for Talk. Thank you, Mike. Also, think about this, says Graham in Birmingham. Keir Starmer has done what he said he would. He smashed the gangs by making it easier for illegals to come here. There is no need for any more gangs. Mandy in Guildford, good morning. Good morning, David. With regards to the migrants returning home for a holiday, I mean, that is unbelievable. David, how do they actually go on holiday if they've thrown away their passport? If they have a British passport, they would have had to put in their country of origin on the paperwork. Good one. Don't know the answer to that. David Stewart says, if reform is far right, then Labour is far left, and that needs to be shouted as loudly as possible. Reform isn't far right, by the way. Loads of you getting in touch about Tony Blair. Tony Blair says, by the way, the solution to all our problems in immigration is ID cards. No, it isn't, Tony. Tony Blair, you've had your time, says Gary. Your legacy is open borders, possibly an illegal war. You need to butt out. Keep all of those messages coming in. But now it is time for something rather different. Let's talk about this week's weird news from around the world. And joining me is broadcaster Stephen Milne, resplendent from being on holiday.
Yes, good morning, Doctor.
Good morning. We've missed you.
I've missed you.
Have you? That's
and it's funny, I heard earlier you talked about Yorkshire puddings.
I did, yeah. Yorkshire Pudding Day.
Yorkshire Pudding Day. Well, I got in on Friday night, jet-lagged, woke up on Saturday, very tired and hungry, had no food in the house, opened the freezer, opened a bag of Yorkshire puddings, ate all of them. With gravy. There was nothing in the fridge.
No, brilliant though.
So I had Yorkshires and gravy, and it was delicious. And I love Yorkshires.
No, so do I. And also, where I am, they serve big Yorkshire puddings with everything in the Yorkshire pudding, and then gravy all over. It's delicious.
Lovely, lovely.
Would it worry you about calorie counting? What do you think about the pubs?
I like the idea of the calorie counting within reason, because I do think to myself, but if I'm at the pub, I'm not there to calorie count. I want to have a few pints and fun.
I've seen you.
I know.
Yeah.
But when I do see it at the fast food places, I do like that they show you the calories sometimes, because I think, oh, do I go for that one or that one? It sometimes can influence me.
So I remember vividly being in Cheesecake Factory in America, and I thought I'll go for something healthy, which was salmon and some vegetables.
But
it was like 10 million calories because it was covered in sugar.
Also, Cheesecake Factory, it's this thick, that menu. I'm there for a week going, is this just the starters? When do you get to the burgers? And then you have a burger anyway, which is 1 million calories.
Yeah,
so,
brilliant.
yeah, okay.
I miss it. And other available fast food restaurants are available.
Yes.
Now, let's talk about... So you've been going through the news around the world, and you've chosen some absolutely priceless ones. Where do you want to start?
Should we start with the car in Berlin? Okay. If you go to the airport, it can be very expensive to park your car. Okay, we know that. Okay, airports can charge you a lot of money. Well, at Heathrow, it's £5 to drop people off. You know, you're not even...
Is it really?
Yes, you drop people off, it's £5 to be dropped off, apparently. Now, in Berlin, just to let you know, basically, if you're there for the first 10 minutes in the short-term parking, it's free. After 30 minutes, it's $11, and then after an hour, it's $23. It's $550 a day. I think that's a lot of money for a short-term parking, don't you think?
I do, because your flight's probably $29.99.
Well, exactly, depending on who you fly with.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of fees and charges which is there. If that's for the short term. If you go to the long-term parking, it's slightly better. But there was a VW Golf that was abandoned in that short-term parking for a year, and it's racked up fees of over $200,000. Over 200,000 euros. Now, there's lots of issues here. I thought, how could they have not known there's a car? There it is.
You're kidding. So someone just popped their car. They thought, I'll pop on a
Pop
flight.
it in.
How much? 200,000?
200,000 over the year.
Lot, isn't it?
And it's unclear how authorities have let this one just been sitting there for so long.
Imagine coming back and just...
I know.
And trying to pay that.
Little ticket on the windowsill. But basically, they have looked into it. They can't find the owner. Surprise, surprise. You know, trying to find who the owner is.
How much is the car worth?
Exactly. It's not worth much at all.
Leave it, the car.
But, I mean... People have thought about that before, haven't they? I mean, when you do go there to park, do you park in the airport, short-term, long-term? Because in Australia, for example, my brother did this recently on our trip, he parked miles away because it's so much cheaper, and then it's so difficult to get to the airport because they charge you so much.
But then you've got children and bags and buses, and it's pouring with rain.
Yeah, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I can't be doing with that. Anyway, good story.
Big
like
fee.
That.
Yeah, in Berlin.
Next one.
Cars. Let's talk about cars again. We all know that SUVs can be very expensive, okay? And this
these sports utility vehicles,
yes,
big things.
The SUVs, yes, especially if you get a Range Rover.
Ooh, no.
And there's a gentleman called John, and he bought a lovely car. It cost £183,000. It's a Range Rover 2024 SV Edition 1. It's got £10,000 graphite wheels. It's got a luxurious high-tech interior, all sorts of interesting features, including seats that vibrate to the sound of the music that you're playing. How fabulous is that? Anyway, this car is very, very expensive, and he bought it from a dealership in Warwickshire. And he basically said, "Look, it can't be stolen. It's £183,000. It's unstealable,
right?
All right, due to the fantastic new feature of the Jaguar Land Rover JLR security upgrade that made it unstealable. Well, 60 hours later, it was stolen. Stolen. It was it was stolen. And he couldn't believe it happened. So there's some footage of them arriving, here we go, at 1 o'clock in the morning, and basically it was stolen, but they didn't even come into the house or near the house. They just basically were able to gain access to the car and leave without any problems. They were in and out in 15 minutes. So they don't know how they did it, but this new security system obviously hasn't worked. Because there's all sorts of... technology that can actually gain access through mimicking the actual, the fob to get in. But that wasn't done. And they got in, stole the car, and Jaguar Range Rover are claiming that it's a it's nothing to do with them. And they don't know how they got in. They're not sure what the technology was. But this £183,000 car was stolen within 2.5 days.
Oh, I love the fact his 183 grand car is next to a van.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, that's the wife's car. I mean, that's... I'll have the 183 grand Range Rover, and you can have the van.
You can have the van, but the van's still there. It's not being stolen. At least she can get to work.
Yeah, that's
whatever
very
she
true.
wants to do.
That's very true. I like that.
Unstealable, but it was stolen.
And of course, clearly stolen for order, wasn't it? If they got in and out in 15 minutes, come on.
But also, this is just me thinking here. They knew where to go. They got dropped off. They got in. They got out. It almost feels too good to be true. Like it's almost like it was set up or it was almost planned.
You should be a police officer.
I should be a police officer. I do love a crime.
You do like
a crime series. I really do. Who done it?
Who did do it?
Yes, who did
They don't
do
know.
it?
So did he get his money back? Did
No,
the insurance pay
it's
out?
ongoing, but they won't. They
And
said
the insurers?
No mention of the insurers.
There's a surprise.
There's a surprise there. They're too busy.
Okay, shall we talk about marathons?
A marathon.
Yeah.
How would you feel if you were running and next to you was a robot running a marathon? Have you run a marathon?
I have, yeah.
Have you run a marathon?
Yeah.
Okay, I haven't run a marathon.
I'm never doing that.
Yeah, no, I
again.
would never do that either.
Also, I made the mistake after the marathon. I got in a lovely hot bath, and I couldn't get out of the bath. I'm not kidding. So there I am in the bath. I can't believe I'm telling you. There I'm in the bath, and I can't actually get out. So I then had to sort of haul myself, naked self, out of bath onto bath mat and crawl to get out.
Why couldn't you move?
Because you should never have a hot bath. You must always have a cold shower because your muscles otherwise.
Aren't you meant to be a doctor?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I was so pleased to finish after 26.2 miles.
Of course, that's a long way. Well, like the London Marathon, I've always watched them run past.
I know.
And thought, that's lovely. But they dress up as fridges and things.
You normally watch them with a pint of beer going.
Right, exactly. I'm at
Come
the pub
on.
watching, going, yes, good luck. Well, there we go. And then someone runs past in a big outfit and dressed
As
up
a
as
hot
fridges.
dog.
As a hot dog. Looks like a dinosaur. They're the fun ones. You know the ones that run around like this that just do all that. They're brilliant.
Also, imagine that tail. Anyway, very funny.
Anyway, very funny.
Yeah.
So marathons, basically, there is a half marathon, not a full marathon, that's been run in Beijing. And basically, it's going to come up in April.
Right.
And it's going to be in the Economic Technological Development Area. It's the E-Town. It's going to be hosting this event. 12,000 people are expected to be involved, including robots. Excuse me. Look at these people. Now, Tesla, Boston Dynamics and 1X are making this one of the strangest marathons in history. Now, these participating robots must have 2 legs. They need to be between 0.5 metre and 2 metres tall. No giant mechanics are allowed. So you can't have like a transformer thing that's running through. Now, they will run or walk on 2 legs, and they will do it. But there's... The question is, will they beat a human or not? So there's been some investigations. The robot's speed are reportedly ranging between 8 to 12 kilometres per hour. But to finish the 21-kilometre half marathon, it needs an average speed of 14 kilometres an hour.
Right.
So they're not going to be running possibly fast enough or walking. However, they've also got battery problems.
Of course they have.
So the battery is basically going to need to be changed halfway through.
And is that allowed?
Yeah, it's allowed.
Oh,
They've
okay,
allowed that.
right.
So
Where is the battery?
The battery it's probably on
In
the
their
back
chest
in the
or
chest or the back of the actual
I
robot.
love the running action.
I know, it's like me walking like that.
Yeah, you're
That's just
rubbish.
not very good at all. So it's basically going to happen in April. And it's the first time ever. 12,000 runners and half a dozen robots will be running. But let's see if a robot or a human wins.
But also imagine if you're doing your best and then a robot goes past.
Runs
That'd be-
past you.
that'd be
Yeah,
pretty
that wouldn't be
miserable.
very good.
Steve, thank you for the moment. We'll take a break. More weird news after this break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
9 Sunday, February the 2nd, Steve Milne, broadcaster, joins me this morning, regaling us with the weird news stories from around the world. They are pretty priceless. Next, what's next up?
Let's go to China. And let's speak about a gentleman who basically had a knock on the door from the authorities in Jinji, which is a town southwest of Shanghai, offering to buy his 2-story house for a lot of money. It was over $220,000 they offered him. Plus, they offered to give him 2 other houses if he would please move out.
And why did they want him to move out?
He said no.
Right. But why did they want him to go?
They wanted to build a highway.
Right.
Through his house.
Right.
He said no.
He said no.
They've built around his house. He now has a house in the middle of a highway or a freeway.
No.
So he said, basically, he was being clever, and I've heard of these stories before.
Yeah.
The authorities come to say, we would like to buy your property, we want to come through. They offer you money, and you say no. There it is. So he wanted more money, and he basically, the authorities went, nope, we're not giving you more money. We're taking away the offer. We are building around you. It's now become a tourist attraction. People are going to see this incredible freeway that's being built. He goes back every evening once they've finished working. No. See that tunnel there? Yeah. He goes through that tunnel to leave. He's got a tunnel. They've built a tunnel to his house. So he has to pass through a concrete pipe in order to leave his home in the middle of the highway. And basically, he's got an 11-year-old grandson who also is going to be living with him. And they've basically said, listen, we offered you the money. We offered you an extra addition. He said no, and they decided to build around him. Wow. I've heard of stories like this actually in Australia where they've offered, you know, a lot of money for a house. The people don't take the money. They build around and then come back and offer 2, 3, 4 times as much, and a lot of money can be made. So, you know, you would maybe bargain a little bit, but I don't think he expected the authorities just to go, well, no, thank you, and then just to literally build around.
Brilliant, very funny.
Which is very funny.
Weddings.
Weddings. Okay, so this is an interesting story in Australia, of all places. And it's in Australia. Let me tell you the story. It's this woman.
Yeah.
She met this gentleman on a dating app.
Oh yeah.
And they started to see each other. And this gentleman said, "I would like to invite you to a white party in Sydney." So telling her partner to bring a white dress, come to the event, and the woman accepted, saying, "This is great." But when she got there, she was shocked and furious to find that there was no one there except a photographer, a photographer's friend, and a marriage official.
Right.
She didn't know what was going on,
No.
and he said, "I would like to pretend and stage a wedding for my Instagram followers so I can maybe generate some money. Would you stage this wedding with me so we can pretend to be married so that we can get lots of followers?" And she said, "I'm not too sure about this." Rang her friend, spoke to her friend, and said, "This seems a bit dodgy to me. What should I do?" And her friend said, "Look, it's fine, because as long as a file of a notice of intended marriage hasn't been submitted, you can't be married. You need to sign that off." And she said, "Well, I haven't signed anything. Let's go through with it." So she dressed up and pretended, and she cheered, and all this is all for Instagram. She was getting married. She actually got married, and she's gone to court, and she said that it's been staged. She had no idea because he had forged her signature to file that they were going to get married.
Filed.
They had filed, and it was forged by him.
Oh, okay. So she should be fine.
So she is fine. Basically,
she is fine.
It's been an old, and the judge said, "Listen, this should never have happened." However, obviously, when she got there, it was completely fake. He wanted her to help him with an application for a visa to stay in Australia. So it was all staged and set up so that he could basically get permanent residency.
He should go to prison.
Well, he should.
Yeah.
But it was a prank that the judge said, obviously, she had no idea about. But she went through with it thinking it was a complete fake faux wedding.
Appalling.
But it actually wasn't. I mean, I'm finding it quite funny, but yes. It's not a good thing in Australia.
No, but I'm pleased, and actually, I mean, that's entrapment, isn't it, or whatever?
Yes.
I mean, I don't know what he would have been charged with, but that's terrible. Let's talk about expensive streets.
Yes. So when it comes to expensive shopping, expensive streets, we think of places like maybe New York, because New York actually is, or it was, Fifth Avenue. New York's Fifth Avenue was had the title of the most expensive street in the world. However, it's been dethroned by, let me say this correctly, Monte Napoleone if I said that correctly.
think so.
Gabriella, producer, will tell me off.
She will.
It's an upscaling shopping street in Milan, in Italy, and basically
Milan. Is that like Milan?
Milan.
Yeah.
Yes, Milan.
Milan.
This company, Cushman & Wakefield, publishes a global index that ranks the most expensive shopping areas by rent prices. Fifth Avenue has always been in the top few, but it's been surpassed by Montepellione, as I mentioned, in Milan. €2,500 is the average price spent on products. €2,500 on one item is the average price.
2.5 or two, what? How much?
€2,500 is the average price spent on one item. So it's very, very expensive. Basically, it's luxury
But I
tourism.
can see that happening. I mean, if you go to Rodeo Drive, for example, in Beverly Hills, I mean, again, there's money oozing out of everywhere. Not from me.
No, I walked around and have a look, and then go somewhere.
Sit on your hands.
And sit on my hands.
Do not buy.
I walk past and think to myself, can I pop in and have a look? And it's like Pretty Woman. They're like, no, you can't come in here, I'm afraid.
And of course, Rodeo Drive at the bottom of there is the Beverly Wilshire, where Pretty Woman was filmed.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah. Big mistake.
Big mistake. Huge. Yeah. So yes, basically, I didn't realise this, but the businesses are expected to pay an average of €20,000 per square metre. To have their stores, but you've got Fendi and Prada and Versace, all the big brands.
And you have to say, look, the Italians know how to dress.
They do look fabulous.
They do look fabulous.
Smell good, look good. Very, very, very
It's
good.
very deeply irritating. That's why we left the EU. Steve, thanks ever so much for coming in. Steve Milne there, our broadcaster with weird news from around the world. Lots of messages are coming. I want to take some voice notes, your calls, your thoughts this morning on the government's direction or lack of it. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
So he has the mind of a 10-year-old, and the officer said, well, I have to speak to my sergeant. I've got no doubts that they really took him in because they can claim they detected a crime. So they're prepared to cause misery to a family, misery to a chap who's severely and mentally disabled, and his good family who've probably never been in trouble with the police before, just to, one, they can claim the detection. And here we get this stupid situation where the police are too busy policing tweets and not the streets.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 9:49, Sunday, February the 2nd. We were just talking about weird news from around the world. So many of you getting in touch about this. David says, the running robot gate makes it look like it's got a dose of the runs. I would agree with that. Dave Clifford, I like this. Come on, David. We know about that stolen car, that Range Rover, the 108. What was it? £187,000. Come on, David. We all know the car is his wife's. The van is the husband's. He's out in the van earning the money to pay for his wife's luxury. You're in trouble. Keep all of those messages coming in. What about this one? Daniel in Edinburgh. Good morning to you. David, I was on a weekend away with my partner in York and visited a little place that made Yorkshire pudding wraps. Of course, it's Yorkshire Pudding Day today. Yorkshire pudding wraps, a large Yorkshire pudding with all the trimmings wrapped up inside it. It was like having angels dance on my tongue. I waited around 30 minutes more to get it, but it was so worth it. I'm really hungry. Moving on, let's go back to the front pages this morning. Of course, Keir Starmer says, I'm going to make it easier for illegal migrants to come in. Oh, by the way, whilst I'm at it, I'm actually going to get closer to Europe. No one knows who's running the Labour Party. I mean, could they be any more disastrous or out of touch with the British public? Loads of voice notes. Claire from the Wirral, good morning.
Good morning, David. Claire from the Wirral here. The working class of this country feel alienated by the political classes. If illegal non-British aliens are being led and fed and housed and given money and basically rewards for doing nothing, yet as citizens of this country, the people, especially the young people, are not being prized and valued, not supported and given work prospects, such as training schemes and work apprenticeships, then Reform will continue to grow and prosper as a so-called far-right party. Reform is far right now because the other parties have become more far left. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Trevor is in Lancashire. Good morning.
Morning, David. If you call people far right long enough, people start to believe it, and that is what they are doing. They are just constantly calling Reform far right so that people will start believing it.
I was asking this morning, this lazy trope, Reform is a far-right party, what does that mean? Is it? I don't think it is. But obviously, as we heard there, Trevor says, if you call it the name for long enough, it sticks. I think it's an attack line, actually, from Labour, because I think Labour is panicking. I think the Tories are panicking as well. I was told the other day by a friend of mine the only solution is for a merger with Reform and the Conservatives, and I was saying absolutely not. There is no way that's happening. It's happened once before, and look what happened. Robert has left a voice note on immigration. Good morning.
Good morning, David. I'm absolutely gobsmacked at what this government is doing with immigration. I'm ashamed and disgusted by my government. They don't act or speak on my behalf. Have a great day.
Thank you for that, Robert. Roy, also on immigration, good morning.
What will the Muppets do when some of these immigrants decide to turn terrorists? Will the idiots in 10 Downing Street cover it up and say, no, they weren't terrorists? I think they would. Anything to stay in power.
It's a really interesting point, that, and of course they're trying to crack down on hate speech. What they mean by that is people who are deeply concerned about the direction of this country, undocumented illegal migrants coming to this country. We have no idea who they are, where they've come from, and oh yeah, we'll give them a house, we'll look after them, we'll hotel them, and that is what is underpinning all of this, in my humble opinion. That was Roy there. Nick also sent a voice note. Good morning.
Morning, David. Tony Blair despises populism because that's the very mechanism by which the people tell the politicians that they're in charge and the politicians work for the people. That is the last thing that Tony Blair ever wanted, and it's certainly the last thing he wants now when he's in charge of his globalist revolution. Have a good day, David.
I think you're right. His answer to everything is ID cards, ID cards, ID cards, and this globalist agenda is deeply worrying. We don't matter, actually, according to Tony Blair, or this is my thought process behind him. We don't matter. These forces at Davos, the World Economic Forum, the globalists who are all conspiring, they have a plan, And the plan doesn't include actually consulting anyone who actually votes. John is in Woking. Good morning, John.
Good morning, David. The one person who's not been mentioned in this immigration talk is our dear King.
Yes.
Now, all these people who are coming to Britain, they've got no values, British values. I wonder what they're going to think of our royal family when Prince George comes to the throne. What are they going to think of him? You know, they all want, millions of them want Sharia law.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, of course, the king is apolitical. Politically, he's not allowed to get involved. Now, what we don't know...
Can he, what's that term about Parliament?
Dissolve
Parliament. Can he do that?
I think theoretically the answer is probably yes, but constitutionally, theoretically, but it would never happen. There would have to be a parliamentary mechanism to have a general election.
Well, when his grandchildren and great-grandchildren are wiped out and no longer on the throne and no longer running this, leaders of our country, he may think different.
John, really...
I would, wouldn't you?
Well, it's an interesting call, interesting thought, John. Thank you. Derek is in Manchester. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. I mean, just appalled by the headlines.
Lively show as usual.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, it's thanks to all our listeners and viewers.
I had to phone up because you had such an idiot on before saying how welcome we should be to all these migrants that are sneaking, stealing the way into the country, basically. For such a young chap, I couldn't believe it because at the end of the day, when he ends up unemployed and no pension and all the rest of it, is he going to be sorry for what he said this morning? Oh, what a joke. I mean, I happen to remember in the 70s when Labour were in, they left the country in an absolute mess. I mean, we were having power cuts every week and all the rest of it.
I remember.
We were going to the shop for candles. And then, of course, when Tony Blair was in, I remember, and Gordon Brown, I remember him actually standing there, calling an old woman from Rochdale, a bigoted old thing, and at the same time he was saying, we are going to have a points-based Australian system. Now, that was all them years ago, and we're still talking the same rubbish now from every party, not just Labour, every party that's been in since I was born. They've all told a pack of lies, and they've all carried on mass immigration, regardless of what the people think. And isn't it about time they stopped? Isn't it about time we got a proper party that and as you say, populism. Yeah, populism, because we do employ them when all's said and done. We're the people paying their wages. I think they've all forgot this over the years. I really do. And what you've just mentioned there about them calling reform far right, they would have obviously called Winston Churchill far right as well, because he wanted to save the country. Were Reeves used far right? Was he an extremist? Should Trump take his bust out of the White House now because he was an extremist?
Well, I share your frustration. The whole thing is absolutely nonsensical, and this terrible labelling of reform as far right, as many of you have said this morning, is just ridiculous. Thank you for all your calls this morning, Peter Cardwell. Good morning.
Good morning,
That's
David.
Lucky, I nearly wore a pink shirt.
Listen, we're going to continue the conversation on Labour easing those checks on illegal migrants. What on earth are they doing? They're saying they want to smash the gangs. How are they going to smash the gangs if they're doing this? How are they going to disincentivise people coming to our shores?
But you're a clever, political type. I do not know what is going through their heads.
It doesn't make any sense. I mean, they will say that the Conservatives introduced some of these rules. They've never actually been implemented. Maybe they should go. Well, actually, surely if you implement the rules,
yes,
that would
took
work.
A long time. The illegal migration bill took a long time to get through.
And now they want to repeal parts of it as well. I think it's appalling. I think people are rightly so many stories that we talk about come down to fairness, and this is a key issue of fairness. Who has the right to be in the country? Who has contributed? Who hasn't? We're going to continue that conversation through our programme as well.
And I had these two messages from people, a doctor's receptionist, also people who just seen it firsthand about the injustice of the whole thing. Anything else?
Yeah.